Hey, only 5 months into the new year? Well, it's not as bad as the last yearly roundup video, is it? 2025 was a busy one for me, on both the YouTube and life front, as well as a mixed to pretty damn positive year for games I got to. A year of gems, and a year of slop. A year of remasters, and a year of masterful games. Good games. Now, considering how much of last year was taken up with catching up on my 2024 backlog, check out my video on that one, somewhere. I'm honestly kinda surprised I got through as much as I did in 2025. And, as always, I hate to see the effort go unnoted, so here is my ranked rundown and thoughts on everything new I played in 2025. Beginning, as always, at the coveted No Man's Sky position at last place, with Delta Force 2025. Bit of Red Scott trivia for you. I practically grew up on the classic Novalogic Delta Force games. Delta Force 2, Task Force Dagger, the latter being not only my first online multiplayer game, but literally some of my first YouTube videos. I'm talking 2006, 7, pre-Google 240p days. Oh, they weren't good. These games were open world, tactical, realistic, aspirationally, kind of the forerunner to the Armas and Operation Flashpoints that followed.
Ah, Raymond. No! Get back! Ah!
So, news of a revival and essential remake of Delta Force Black Hawk Down piqued my interest when it was announced back in 24 or so, but to be honest I kind of forgot about it, till it popped up on my PS5 dashboard one day and was notably free. So, besides promising a retake on the Battle of Mogadishu-inspired 2003 game, looking to be heavily influenced by the Michael Bay film of the same name, I didn't exactly know what to expect from the rest of Delta Force 2025, and well, I'm still not exactly sure how to report back to you guys about it. This game doesn't know where its focus is, or what the hell it wants to be. Battlefield-style, massive combined arms multiplayer, Rainbow Six style operator slop, single-player tactical FPS, extraction shooter. This honestly feels like 3.5, sometimes wildly different games, all with wholly different visuals and control schemes and UI, hurriedly stitched together, with a venerable brand name slapped on for good measure. So, to give it its due in any way, I figured that the only way I could talk about this game is as at least two main distinct entities, beginning with the part I originally was more there for, the Black Hawk Down campaign mode, which, sorry to say, despite some impressive presentation right from the jump, was a huge letdown, simply due to being practically unplayable. And I use those words very deliberately here, practically unplayable on console. Technically playable, but this game can not be played by practical means. I have never, in all my days, played a game with aiming this fucking broken, and I do not understand why they could make it this way, ship it this way, and fail to patch it still to this day. Again, I am playing on PS5, and I can't imagine this issue affects mouse and keyboard users at all on PC, so bear that in mind. But on consoles anyway, there's a huge, completely redundant dead zone in the analog sticks, which simply don't register movement at all till you're at near full tilt, at which point it will then register all the movement. Precision aiming, hell, any aiming is made, again, practically impossible. Personally had to resort to spray and pray to make any damn progress in the story. It's genuine arse. And trust me, I know how bad this gameplay must look. It looks like my dad's behind the controller. Oh, which button makes the bullets go? But to be clear, this here is the same game. Same controller, on the multiplayer mode. No problems. But for the Black Hawk Down campaign, apparently, this is just how it be. What's worse is that it seems that they did account for this by having a dead zone sensitivity slider in the settings, which don't do anything. Naturally, me wanting to play the game, I did some searching, found of course countless other people complaining about the problem, and a whole cottage industry of best controller settings guides on YouTube, which might honestly just be a placebo because I can't honestly tell you if there was any tangible difference. Checking back on the reveal trailer, there was also a lean mechanic which, while playing, I certainly felt was absent, but bewilderingly this is also broken by default and needs manual rebinding to use. Sorry to say, there just ain't much else for me to talk about this mode because it's fundamentally broken for me. It's pretty, I'll give it that. I was in awe at some of the visuals, especially apparent given that this was a free add-on to an already free-to-play game. Like, holy shit, how did they fund this? Premium loot boxes, evidently, but we'll get to that. And, what else? Oh yeah, hey, if you have friends, preferably masochistic ones, the whole campaign is co-op for up to 4 players. Oh wait, no, the co-op feature is also broken on consoles. Okay. This campaign would need to be a damn masterpiece, or the player really committed to bother pushing through to the end, because right now, I couldn't think of a worse time, or a worse waste of time. But speaking of time wasters, we now come to the main course, or maybe more appropriately, the buffet, the a la carte, the goddamn shotgun spread to see what sticks of multiplayer modes that make up the rest of this release. Delta Force Online is a lot. It's a lot. From the main menu alone, you'll be bombarded with the worst of modern UI design, with boxes everywhere denoting the game's umpteen game modes. For some, Battlefield at home, there's the Umbrella Warzone mode with 64-player Rush or Conquest, 4v4 Team Deathmatch, and a dozen other things I didn't touch. Under the Operations banner, you have PvPvE, Extraction Shooter, Guff, and the more slow-paced, tactical... whatever, I didn't play it. There are season passes, skin packs, a hub world, sometimes that I found myself in by accident once and then never went back. It's just there's a lot. And all in all, it completely lacks the singular focus that makes the games it's cherry-picking from successful. It wants to be everything at once. Most of all, it seems, it wants to be Rainbow Six Siege, as the expected, down-to-earth army man men expected from, Delta Force, are replaced with a bunch of original characters do not steal, with special abilities and one-liners and a fucking bow and arrow.
You ain't seen nothing yet.
I got your back, your front, the whole meat sack.
You ain't seen nothing yet.
I fight for my comrades, honor, and...
You ain't seen nothing yet.
The result, then, is a large-scale infantry and vehicular battlefield populated entirely by infinite clones of the same dozen millennials. Now, all of that said, as sloppy operator slop as this entire game is, as nonsense and unfocused and off-brand it feels, I was actually having a lot of fun with it. I did not dislike. Hell, once I got this review written up, I had to make a conscious choice to go, nope, uninstall, don't go back, you have way more things to do with your time. I'm under no illusions that everything Delta Force does is an inferior copy of another franchise, games I'd probably be better off spending my time with, but that's just it. I think I've just personally been in such a drought for this kind of game that I didn't realise how much I missed it. I mean, the last Battlefield I played was the World War I one, whatever one that one was. Battlefield, the World War I one, I think. But even that, I only played half as much as I did Battlefield 4 and 3 and Bad Company 2 before it. Not to mention all the other multiplayer mill shooters of the era, Black Ops 1, Homefront, that often forgotten modern era Medal of Honor reboot. God, what a forgettable game, given how many fucking hours I spent in it. Meanwhile, what multiplayer games have I played with any regularity in the past 10 years? Overwatch? 60 quid to buy into the latest Battlefield in the hope that it clicks for me, and that I have friends who are also willing to spend 60 quid, $70 on the game? Anyway, haven't really talked much about the game because I guess I'm just running on the assumption we've all played, or at least are familiar with the concept of Battlefield. I spent most of my time in the 32v32 modes in attack and defend or king of the hill, control the command post type matches. Vehicles can be spawned in on a points-based system, and while the division of roles isn't quite as clear as the more pointed classes of other games, the operators are categorised into roles, with engineers able to counter vehicular threats, and most everyone else are just left to suck it up when an IFE rolls onto the point. If it even needs to be said, the multiplayer controls completely differently from the Black Hawk Down campaign, to the point, again, of being an entirely separate game. By default, you'll be auto-sprinting everywhere, though again that's something you can adjust in settings. Weapon controls feel light and floaty, rejoining the action from respawn is pretty damn fast, and I just think, overall, it's a pretty unintimidating and accessible multiplayer game, even with the absolute clusterfuck it'll often turn into.
That's why I'm here.
Weapon customization is surprisingly damn elaborate, though it doesn't start to open up till you've racked up a few levels, not more than a handful of matches worth though. End of the day, it's a free game, which means you'll have to suffer the deluge of skins and packs and dailies to grind, but at least for me, when I blocked out all that noise and focused myself on 1 or 2 game modes, in other words, doing what the game itself refused to, I guess it was worth the time I gave it. Not by any means what I wanted or expected from a Delta Force revival, weighed down by an abysmal single-player portion, but not totally awful. Yeah.
You ain't seen nothing yet.
Deathground. So, for years now, I've had this personal little obsession with indie dinosaur survival games on Steam who claim, in some way, the mantle of being a spiritual successor to Dino Crisis. I love it, I really do. It's a whole ecosystem in and of itself. Some, most if we're being honest, look like unabashed slop. Others seem to have some genuine promise, and as something of a dinosaur enjoyer myself, I've been keeping an eye on as many of these games as I can, wishlisting them, and will happily try them out, good or bad, when and if they ever release. And the if in these cases is pretty emphasised. Fortunately, this wasn't the case with Jaw Drop Games' 4-player co-op survival, which did launch, even if only in early access for now, and which I grabbed day of release. What I didn't grab were 3 other copies, nor the enthusiasm of any of my friends, so right away, in its defence, Deathground is fighting an uphill battle as I play it without the natural fun buff from being in a Discord group call. Yep, it's another in the genre of what I have only recently learned is called friend slop. Everything is slop these days. You are slop, I am slop. We live in a sloppy world. Anyway, Deathground. In its defense, at least it's not doing the same 4 idiots in a hazmat suit doing spooky package deliveries or something formula that 97% of this genre have produced. For some reason, as I discussed in last year's video, no, we're not just doing Lethal Company again, fortunately. No, we're doing Alien Isolation again. Like I said, Deathground is in early access still, but as of its official first major release and subsequent patches up to at least April 2026, it remains an unfortunate disappointment. Lacking in content and becoming almost immediately tired and repetitive, I'm not even convinced that the addition of a Phil or Lily screaming through the microphone would do much to liven up proceedings. With all of 4 maps at present, each one presenting the players with a variety of thrilling objectives, such as reset the power breakers, locate the fuses to reset the power breakers, be scanned, locate fuses to fix the scanners, convince a raptor to be scanned, open a door.
Open the door.
Or, if you're really lucky, locate the fuses to open the door. All this while having to avoid roaming carnivores, running and hiding, navigating around these dimly lit facilities through the not-so-safety of ventilation shafts, and searching the same rooms again and again for the last of the 12 damn fuses the objective wants. 12! Scattered across a barely lit multi-floored industrial wank environment, where after a while I'm left doubting if the game even procedurally generated enough for the objective to even be met in the first place. Not the most fun. The game has 6 classes, though in its current form, the loadouts and characters themselves are unshackled from each other, making these classes no more than character models, while the tools themselves can be equipped in the pre-game lobby or swapped out mid-mission where the tranquilizer gun or first aid pack or whatever might be found randomly. Ideally, teamwork is used to hit objectives in a timely manner, revive injured comrades, or protect the VIP player carrying the stolen egg or raptor embryo or whatever. Though, in my time with it, I was able to get through maps solo, albeit at a tediously slow pace, as I'm searching every possible corner in this abysmally lit, eye-strainingly grey facility for that last goddamn fuse. You know what, you're right, we haven't actually talked about the dinosaurs in this here dinosaur game. Well, they sure are there. Despite the clear ambition here, the xenomorph of Alien Isolation, these turkeys are not. In truth, by the 3rd or 4th go around on the inevitable fuse hunt each game I did eventually turned into, all actual threat and tension that these hunters are supposed to instill completely evaporated. You could be in line of sight and fairly handily slink away before they even react to you more times than not. And even simply outrunning them, if you need to, is a perfectly viable option. Hell, the only time I was ever actually caught, and, well, not even killed, by one of them was when I decided to use a locker as a hiding place. The lesson here, of course, being, why bother? Just run around enough and they'll probably lose sight of you. And it's not just the Utahraptors that feel a bit sluggish. The whole game, running on Unreal Engine 5, is pretty poorly optimised for what it is. Now, I know my PC's due for an upgrade. You know, an upgrade that'll never come now in this economy, but even so, I had to tune down so many superfluous post-processes and effects to get this running close to smoothly. And I'm just left questioning, what was it all in service of? The environments are pretty flat and unappealing. Grey corridors with random CS office desks scattered around, broken up by the occasional blood splat and flayed corpse. It's just not that pretty of a game to warrant the pretty hefty strain it seems to take to get running. Like, this game has a 50GB install, when to me, it's not that much more impressive than a few good Garry's Mod maps. I suppose to leave on a more hopeful, constructive note for the game, which has continued to see patches and updates. More content and variety of content is most desperately needed, going beyond more maps and character classes, but into rethinking objectives and, hell, maybe even the game loop itself. I can see the vision, I can even see and recognise, specifically I think, from where they've been inspired with some of these puzzles, but they just aren't enough in its current state. Phasmophobia, for instance, I think has quite a similar co-op vibe to this, but has more to its gameplay loop. It's a bit more investigative, with ramping threats as you take too long or start hitting objectives. Maybe something to be learned and applied here? I don't know, just give it more of a let's split up and look for clues dealy, rather than the current let's beeline the objective marker. Only ever splitting up to look for those fucking fuses. Doom, the Dark Ages. Yeah. The modern Doom revival has been one of those great success stories of the past decade. Doom 2016 was one of my favourite games that year, even more so on recent replays in preparation for this 3rd installment. Doom Eternal, rather than simply be content as more of the same, innovated and evolved with enhanced player mobility and a faster, more brutal and immediate pace of combat. I also didn't care for it as much, but anyway, along came 2025's The Dark Ages, the biggest game yet, taking us far from the claustrophobia of Mars's corridors to epic sci-fantasy battlefields, and with the promise of yet more genre reinvention. Large-scale demon hordes, airborne dragon combat, a renewed focus on melee, and greater story emphasis, acting as a prequel, providing the origins to the Slayer as we come to know him in 2016. And ultimately, none of it evolves the series in any meaningful way. I didn't hate Dark Ages by any means, but for a game trying as hard as it is to go hard, the apathy it instilled was only amplified all the more. Dark Ages continues the lore-heavy direction the series has taken since Eternal. I'll admit, I didn't love what I saw as this change from the simplicity of 2016's story, which itself seems to poke fun at the very idea of giving a shit about the plot of a Doom game. At least until the halfway point when you're locked in an unskippable exposition scene with Samuel Hayden, but as I've grown to accept the Warhammer-esque tone that the series was now shooting for, I felt I was primed for Dark Ages on its own terms. Colour me surprised when the promised biblical-scale war for the very soul of the universe became a drab, lore-snooze D&D campaign of Gears of War men fighting like a dude.
But again, I am the devil from the Bible.
The campaign is littered with named characters who leave negative impact. The villain, this Prince of All Hell type fella, has actual motivations and junk which aren't interesting for one. It's just standard 2000s cape shit movie MacGuffin hunt, once I have the cube I'll control the world type shit. But simply by giving the forces of hell a tangible, strategic objective, even being treated and functioning as a military force with fleets and command room board meeting cutscenes, they're instantly less interesting. The sheer irony of missing the value of the unknowable, abstract horror in a game where you hop in a Pacific Rim mech to fistfight Cthulhu. But hey, you can always ignore the plot, the gameplay's what matters. And how has the combat evolved this time? Well, the only way AAA games seem to know anymore: add a parry system. Now, before we poo-poo it, this could have been an interesting development. Do for close quarters brawling what you already did for running and gunning. Give us a collection of diverse melee weapons. Turn the series' signature glory kills from a special finisher into the actual combat. You know, give a new and literal meaning to rip and tear. But instead, melee combat is relegated to two very shallow systems. Number one is the shield parry. When you see a flash of green, press shield. And that'll be that. And number two is your melee weapon. There are 3 of these in the game, only one can be equipped at a time, and they all more or less serve the exact same function. They're the chainsaw from Doom Eternal. They give you health and ammo when you kill something with them. Which means, for balance reasons, you'll be limited on how often you can whip them out. Meaning, melee ammo! Melee attacks require ammo! What fun! Back to parrying though, this becomes one of the most relied upon actions you'll be making all game. And while it isn't particularly difficult to pull off, it's more the monotony of how often you'll be doing it. Too many battles turn into a tennis match, waiting for them to serve a green orb for you to deflect back. By the time most mechanics have been fed to you, your entire campaign turns into this colour-coded dance of parry when you see green, throw your shield when you see blue, do a finisher attack when you see purple, and it's all just far more curated and gamified than the frantic chaos of Doom Eternal's combat. And while I can't decide if I can necessarily declare it worse, it's definitely a sidestep, just a change for the sake of change, rather than a development on top of what came before. Hey, if you wanted to make a real step forward for the game, pin off the shitty skill trees already. I'm here to rip ass and tear bubblegum, not mull over skill point investments. For a series as famed for its ultra-violence, the limiting melee ammo and elimination of glory kills for standard enemies make it feel comparatively tame. Your chainsaw shield slices through enemies when thrown, with all the visceral satisfaction of a hot knife through air. And even the weapons feel distinctly less punchy this time around. With the notable exception of the Super Shotty. Unless they've patched it since, the Super Shotgun is ridiculous. Once you've unlocked it, it's practically all you'll ever need. Only gun with any oomph anyway. Which is mad for a game featuring the Skull Grinder 3000. Again, trying too hard to go hard. Speaking of which, we got dragons, guys!
I'm seeing freaking dragons.
This ain't it, Chief. Hell, I'm a sucker for a flying section. You know I love a dogfighting game. I'm a big Ace Combat fan. I'm a big Drakengard. I'm a Drakengard. I've played Drakengard, but far from an evolution of the genre, on every level these sections fail to live up to the potential of the premise, content to be a throwback, in the worst ways, to the 360 or even PS2 era. Just shockingly outdated game design. Circling around, shooting at weak spots, chasing down on-rails enemy fighters. You know, for a series that reinvented the boomer shooter back in 2016, you couldn't even have a swing at reinventing the pterosaur levels from Turok Evolution? Because, graphics aside, we're still firmly on that level here. Ultimately, what damned Dark Ages for me was that the combat, whether on the ground, in the air, or in the Rock'em Sock'em robot, was just kind of boring. Beginning to end, there is almost no sense of escalation. Throwing hordes of demons at you in Chapter 1, and, hey, surprise, hordes of demons at you at Chapter 22. Yes, 22 chapters, by the way, 9 more than either previous game. It's just too damn long to maintain the exact same combat encounters again and again and again. Compared to the honestly exhausting Doom Eternal, challenge plateaus almost immediately in Dark Ages. I literally had one game over screen, and it wasn't till the final, essentially, boss's third of too many damn phases. A boss fight which is completely entirely just a parry timing check, by the way. Welcome back, Lord Gwyn. Now, on the visual and more presentation side of things, it's still Doom, so it's still pretty solid here for the most part. The enemy redesigns, I think, are pretty fantastic, with a nice mix of nostalgic callbacks to the original games and reimagined designs to fit the medieval vibe. I do gotta mention the music here though, which has the unfortunate job of filling the shoes of Mick Gordon, who parted ways with id and Bethesda after disagreements over Eternal's score. Now look, I won't pretend it's awful, it's not even close to bad, but when we had iconic tracks like BFG Division in 2016, with a recognisable tune and rhythm and flow which complemented the combat encounters they were paired with perfectly, the tracks here, by Finishing Move, just fade into the background. Like, I wouldn't be able to pick out a single track from Dark Ages out of a lineup if I had to. Unless it was, I don't know. Dun 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 dun. And you know what? I could say the same thing about the game at large. End of the day, it's still an id Software Doom game. It's not bad. It's not unrepentant dog shit or anything, no matter how critical I've been here. It's just that the bar was set so high by previous installments, a bar that this not only failed to meet, but just didn't feel like it was even really making a committed attempt. Happy to skate by and be mediocre to good, to be a scattershot of half-baked ideas diluting the strong core it inherited, rather than to focus in on a few core mechanics and make them, and the game, the best damn thing it could have been. I don't usually do recommendations in these, per se, but my gut feeling putting this one down was that unless you're a Doom mega fan, or somehow really invested in the lore, just do yourself a favour and give this one a skip. You're not really missing anything. Every year now, it seems that we do get an increasing number of remasters on this list, and every time I cover one I have to ask myself, am I rating this as a remaster, or as a game? Well, 2025 brought this into question not once, but with a triple whammy of honestly pretty excellent remasters. So, do I rank these as games, amidst all new releases at least 20 years they're younger, or as based on the pure, rote, technical, adaptational aspect of it? How well they have been ported over onto new hardware, how well the art style held up, etc, etc. Well, honestly, I've tried both this year. I've formatted this list one way and then the other. I've constantly gone back and forth, and in the end, it only made sense to me to rank them based on the same criteria I do every other game. My own personal enjoyment, with of course all the technical aspects taken into account. And let me just say now, it was trickier than I thought, because I ended up loving all 3 of the remasters this year, but there emerged a clear order of distinction. Beginning with Gears of War Reloaded. Until now, the Gears games have been a total blind spot for me. I knew they were about a bunch of lovable meat men who'd all look like they'd be voiced by Ron Perlman a la Turok 2008. You fucked my brother, Turok. I'm angry. I knew the baddies were called the Locust. I knew there were chainsaw guns, right? Yeah, that's about it. Oh, and I knew about the Mad World trailer for the original game, mostly because the Battlefield Bad Company parody.
The dreams in which I'm dying are the best I've ever had. What does that mean? What does it mean?
Still, when a remaster of the original game, well, a remaster of the 2015 remaster technically, was announced to be coming to the PlayStation for the very first time, it was a perfect opportunity to see what I'd been missing for 20 years. So, first and foremost, how did I find it as a game? Set in a We Have Warhammer 40k at Home universe, Marcus Phoenix and the Meat Men go on a mission to turn the tide in humanity's war against their subterranean enemies after a 14-year battle for control of the planet. Beyond that, I honestly can't say much about the plot because, yeah, there kind of, isn't one. Rather, the game was carried, to me, by a sense of fun and bombast amidst an otherwise dreary apocalyptic warscape. I honestly didn't really care what these guys were doing, why these guys were doing, but I was along for the ride and with a smile on my face the whole time. Gears is solidly a product of its time. Fortunately, it's a product from a time where I actually enjoyed video games, because there was no onboarding required for me here. I just slid right into this like a comfy pair of favourite old slippers, despite having never touched the franchise before now. To be fair, probably on account of how much this game influenced so many games after it which I did play. Between popping mole people heads and raining gore from a well-tossed grenade, the game just has a viscerally satisfying sense of feedback, elevated in part by the PS5's haptic triggers. It just felt really good to play hands-on. Sure, it has a bit of clunk, a little bit of that product of the time I mentioned. Marcus does move like he's shin deep in cement all the time, taking me off guard with the lack of a real sprint animation. He only waddle. The cover system, while innovative at the time and still great, has its moments of stick not stick to what you want, or uncertainty about what constitutes real interactable cover, likely more so with these updated visuals where everything looks great, but the added detail makes it a little bit harder to distinguish what is intended to be interactable. And I did unfortunately find the iconic chainsaw melee kills a little so-so to actually connect and trigger, but, these are the nittiest of picks. The gameplay was, by my money, stellar, in an almost wistful way, nostalgically longing for the simplicity of a 6 to 8 hour level-structured shooter campaign, and not a fucking skill tree to be found. The only time, and I will finish on this, only time I felt the gameplay didn't hold up was when any boss fight occurred, where that sense of visceral feedback throughout the core shooting gameplay is replaced by some gimmick. Bullets that once tore through flesh and bone, now bouncing impotently off every part of the model, save the developer intended weak spot. Big should-be tentpole moments like the Corpser and the Brumac turn into puzzles rather than battles, where, once a solution is known, all challenge dissolves. Hardly, mind you, a Gears-specific problem, as I've commented before on the difficulty shooters have always had with interesting boss fights, at least back then. Resistance Fall of Man's Shoot the Glowing Rods finale, just to name another one from 2006. But now, the important factor here is how Reload succeeds as a remaster, and it's here where things are a little bit more up to debate, and down to taste. Personally, as someone with no attachment to the 2006 game, I think it looks fantastic, though, having seen a comparison video between Reloaded and both the 2006 game and 2015 Ultimate Edition, I am, for the former, surprised at just how stark the change actually is, and for the latter, struggling to really see much of a difference. But hell, for now, allow me just to pretend like Ultimate Edition doesn't exist. Which, to be fair, honestly, until very recently, I didn't. Okay? Next to 2006, Reloaded is a far softer looking game, with brighter lighting, less harsh contrast, and a much greater infusion of colour. The original was so desaturated from what I've seen that at times it almost appears grayscale, especially among the more concrete ruined city maps. There is a grimier, grittier look to the 2006 game which is not nearly as represented in Reloaded, and I can agree to criticism that the characters have been cleaned up and smoothed out, maybe a little bit too much. But honestly, coming at this from an outsider's perspective, I think the grim, dark direction of the original game, which its original, bleaker visual design certainly supported, might honestly be overstated. Apparently that Mad World trailer did a lot of heavy lifting for the supposed tone of this world, because to me, this was a goofy-ass action game about a bunch of ridiculously proportioned chads broing across the city. All quiet on the Western Front? It is not. Now, I obviously can't speak for future installments, but depressing, oppressive, and grey are not how I would have described Gears from my newfound experience with it. And, to be honest, I'm not sure I would have enjoyed it quite as much as I did if they were. Reloaded features fully recreated and vastly improved cutscenes, lighting preferences aside, replaced and redesigned textures and world assets, skyboxes, ruined architecture, improved detail and object placement on often previously barren interiors, and is just all around a drastic improvement, which I was far more impressed about until I learned about 2015. For all intents and purposes, Reloaded is a repackage of the decade-old Ultimate Edition for Sony consoles, just with 4K, higher frame rates, and the addition of cross-play in the multiplayer. I suppose I shouldn't let that fact spoil a good thing. Without its release, I still wouldn't have had a chance to get my hands on any edition, and I am now desperate to somehow get a chance to play Gears 2. But as something that was sold to me as a full remaster, admittedly with my own ignorance of the series partly at fault here, this realisation has taken the shine of this release a bit for me. Still, an excellent game and release through and through. Don't let its relative low ranking here give the impression I felt it wasn't, only that it does feel like a bit of a double dip from Epic Games, when sat alongside all the other true new remasters, not to mention all the actual new games, of 2025. Oblivion Remastered. Here we go, from a remaster of a game I knew nothing about, to one I have been so intimately acquainted for so long that I had no desire to see their weird little squidgy potato face again for as long as I lived. But then the remaster came out and it looked really pretty, so son of a bitch! Just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in. Damn you, Todd! What I will say is this. Despite not adoring the original Oblivion, a game I am very nostalgic for and have played countless times, but on recent plays have found very, very flawed in ways that go beyond the potato people visuals, Oblivion Remastered is probably the most impressive of these modern updates of any game I have seen outside of full-fledged remakes, RE2 style.
I like what I see.
Managing to so drastically improve the visuals, while, honestly, miraculously, managing to maintain the charm and identity of the uniquely charming, read unintentionally comedic arse, of the original.
Kill me. Again? Hit me again. Do it. End my misery. Ah, yes!
See, most solid remasters, anything from Night Dive Studios, for example, improve textures and resolutions and make for a lovely, smooth game that feels as intended. But they rightly rarely ever alter visual design outside of little tweaks here and there. As a counterpoint, Bluepoint's Demon's Souls Remaster, a perfectly good game, I do add, did receive flack from some corners for doing more than was necessary, even infringing on FromSoft's original artistic intent with certain creature, weapon, or world design elements. This is the tricky balancing act of the remaster, but one which, against the odds, Virtuos handled to almost perfection. Almost. But in a game of this breadth, I don't hold oversights too harshly against it. For instance, in the original game, the cavern-dwelling, fishy-faced fucks in the Lovecraft-inspired side quest Shadow over Hackdirt were all given these bloated faces and bulging eyes, very much a feature, not a bug, of that game's absurd character creator, and deliberately harkening back to that Innsmouther fishy look from the inspiring book. In Remaster, however, they are inexplicably reimagined as a bunch of handsome shirtless Kit Haringtons. But then again, reimagined may be the wrong word, since I can only assume that no imagination or intent went into this at all, and these particular NPCs were merely caught in the rising tide of the game engine uplift, defaulting into generic Imperial male templates. An oversight, like I said. There may be a handful of similar examples and other questionable decisions, but overwhelmingly, the visual identity of Citadel remains intact and improved, with the game's armors, creature designs, and most of the main characters all translated over brilliantly. Hell, the only actual designs I dislike is the original content added in the deluxe edition, these DLC armors and whatnot. They're kind of disgusting. While I bring it up, I do appreciate that after 20 years we technically got new content for this game, as 2 small quests are added to acquire the Akatosh and Mehrunes Dagon armor inspired sets, taking advantage of the new voice actors being available in the booth to do a little bit more than what your average Fallout 4 Creation Club quest can. But, not much more. Don't expect something like the Dark Brotherhood questline here. That all said, the remaster does go beyond simply updating the visuals, with the addition of Sprint, a feature totally absent from Bethesda RPGs until Skyrim, impact animations that help make combat feel a bit more impactful and less floaty compared to the original, and a complete overhaul of the leveling system. This change might actually be the most significant, altering how character building and progression functions. I don't hate it. The original system was a bit of a mess, but it was a mess whose navigation made the process of growing your hero interesting, for better and worse. I won't argue it was ideal before. It had a lot of inefficiencies, easily letting you overlevel a skill beyond what would actually benefit you during character level up. Hey there, sport! You wanted to prioritize leveling your mana pool and spellcasting ability? Well, too bad, you've been doing too much jogging lately, so get allocated a disproportionate number of points to speed. It was ultimately easy to miss out on points, or waste a level up by having a nap at the wrong time before getting your lessons in. More forethought and optimization was required in what skills you'd be leveling next to push up which attributes. Like I say, it was far from the perfect system, but with Remaster, all of that is simplified down to a straightforward points buy. You get X to spend each level, put them down on whatever attribute you wish. Efficient, you don't risk any wasted points. The trade-off is that it is a bit boring. And it seems like you can max out your most important skills far earlier than you ordinarily would, leaving you with little real goals to shoot for well before the endgame, outside of just going, fuck it, let's become an everything build. Heavy armor, stealth mage. Why not? But you know what, this could have the most gorgeous visuals, interesting updated gameplay, compelling story, and refined mechanics, but it would have always fallen flat on its face if it failed in one particularly hard to quantify way. Fortunately, Oblivion Remastered retains the spark, the goof, the jank, the fucking oddball nature that was the Elder Scrolls 4, and I love it for that.
I hope I can help.
One of the big sticking points when it comes to remasters and remakes and reimaginations is how modern studios risk paving over the cracks, sanding off the edges, and ultimately handing back a less soulful and authentic copy of the original game.
This is your last warning. Get out, or I'll call the... I welcome you to my humble home.
Bethesda and Virtuos seemed to know better, keeping in botched voice lines, retaining the strange NPC scheduling and dialogue behaviour, and allowing Oblivion to just... Oblivion.
Hello there.
While a handful of new voice actors were brought in to add some desperately needed variety to the original game's 10 voices for the entire population of Citadel, discounting unique voices like Patrick Stewart's Emperor Uriel or Sean Bean's Martin. But the Remasters team knew where to keep old favourite NPCs untouched.
I'm Rena Bruyant. I love dogs. Doesn't everyone?
Basically, what I'm saying is, I'm amazed and relieved that despite all the updates and changes to bring it in line and more accessible to modern players, the janky little soul is the same. I love that. But anyway, if Oblivion holds the title of my new gold standard for how to do a remaster, then what the hell topped it for me? Short answer is, a better actual game. Long answer, well, you'll just have to wait for later in the list. In the meantime, hey, I heard you liked fantasy first-person open-world RPGs! We're gonna be here a while!
The training of thousands has passed through me. Not on this day.
Avowed was a perfectly good first-person fantasy role-playing game. One with a very high level of polish and almost no technical or mechanical complaints that I can think of. One with beautiful visuals, an open world with enjoyable exploration, an accessible story with clear and concise plot hooks, and one which will leave almost no lasting impression on me. Avowed is the latest from the RPG legends at Obsidian Entertainment, assuming we've forgotten about the Outer Worlds 2, which dropped a few months later, and I most certainly did. Set in continuity with their isometric CRPG, Pillars of Eternity, which, while I've apparently played 7 hours of before, I am, for all intents and purposes, completely unfamiliar with as a setting. It strives for more mass appeal, with an Elder Scrolls-like first-person perspective, real-time combat, and open-world questing. For better or worse, though, the Skyrim comparisons kind of end there, however, with this game feeling far more like a traditional CRPG, simply reformatted and fitted with a first-person camera. While it invites the comparisons, this is not a Todd Howard, go anywhere, do anything, climb that mountain, ignore the main quest experience, which does succeed in giving it far greater focus than a Todd Howard experience. We could look to the simple act of looting as a microcosm of this focused design philosophy. While Skyrim or Oblivion can have you rummaging around every crate and chest in a room in the off chance of finding a lettuce or some gold, Avowed simply highlights the 1 or 2 interactable loot objects, leaving the rest as set dressing. As we wander around town, these vast urban spaces with NPCs and homes aplenty, you'll find that these, too, are largely set dressing. Only a handful of doors will lead to an interior, while the vast majority of NPCs will simply spout the same 1 or 2 lines of dialogue, if anything at all.
We must leave. We must leave. We must.
While the world is large with numerous biomes, you will visit these areas according to the strict act-based structure. Again though, while we may be used to the sort of throw yourself into the sandbox and go crazy, that is not what this game is, and instead, like I said, it allowed it to focus more. While there are side quests aplenty, due to each map area acting as an act on their own, side quests are as muscle built atop the story's skeleton, rather than be a bunch of smaller, separate skeletons sprouting from the ankles in a bunch of unrelated directions, a la the guild quest lines in an Elder Scroll. Likewise, the companion roster is limited in number and in flexibility towards the plot, taking on a far more BioWare-style recruitment, tied to moments in the main quest, but are likewise, in my opinion, all the stronger for it. But anyway, now that we've established what this game isn't, what is it, and what is it actually about then? Taking on the role of the Adirian Empire's envoy to this setting's New World equivalent, we find ourselves in an unusual position of authority as an RPG protagonist, arriving on the shores of these living lands, home to unruly colonists, privateers, and persecuted immigrants from the continent, seeking a new life far from the control of the old nations. While tasked with bringing Adirian order to this frontier, we're to resolve a far more existential crisis brewing on the island, as a magical plague, the Dream Scourge, rots away at the land and souls of the inhabitants alike, rendering them mindless husks under the sway of some otherworldly influence. Oh, And just to add more to our plate, we're a godlike, a rare being born with visible physical manifestations of a patron deity, a fungus face in our case, and upon arriving in this new land, have started to hear disembodied voices in our head. So, okay, that's a lot. There's a ton here, which is, on the surface, kinda interesting. We're doing a fantasy setting, but a little more towards the age of discovery, rather than rote medieval sword and sorcery. Sword, sorcery, and guns, if you will. Your role as a member of this imperial court, as I said already, is an unusual dynamic. Yet, at the same time, it's a lot of remixing of things we've seen in countless other stories. The freedom versus security debate, fascists versus nutters, to quote Yahtzee Croshaw. The trope of having the disembodied voice in the protagonist's head. More of that in the next game too. Companion quests that all boil down to unresolved trauma. Unresolved trauma over lost loved ones. Unresolved trauma over lost loved ones. Unresolved trauma over lost loved ones. Fun, sex-crazed, crystal-loving gerbil. The accessibility of the game, its maximum market appeal, cozy, critical role style of fantasy, and bisexual lighting aesthetic, I totally acknowledge, can make it feel a bit toothless. In some ways, and bear with me here, I felt like I was playing what could have been an alternate reality's Morrowind, where a different team landed with some of the same notes and concept pieces and world-building premises of empire and colonialism, religious conflict and mushrooms, oh so many mushrooms, but took the prompt in a very different, cleaner, safer, and naturally less interesting direction. After Elder Scrolls, the natural comparison many people are going to make is to last year's Dragon Age Veilguard, if only for superficial reasons. While Avowed, for one thing, aims to tell a far smaller story, in stakes and in scale, it does so with a consistency and competence not so shared by the ambitious, we'll say, but often wince-inducing Veilguard. There is a subtlety, at times, in Avowed's writing, which elevates even small moments. Our dwarven companion, Marius, for instance, with his seemingly irrational dislike and distrust for all things relating to magic or the soul, only later to find that there's a root cause to this fear, and it's a moment that actually had me go, oh, okay, that's quite good. Only to be kinda ruined at the end when he all but turns to the camera and says, I have been afraid of magic my whole life, but now I have overcome my fear. Like, yeah, I know, I was there, dude. I really liked, how characterful our companions were though, how much they'd take an active role in dialogue with other NPCs, like they're, people with agency and not just an extension of the player character. They'll talk amongst themselves at camp, support or criticize each other on the road. They have histories with each other, going back beyond their orbit with us, referencing past adventures we weren't a part of. This is all great. Though, like the Marius quest example I just referenced, it can start to smell a bit of Netflix writing, where it feels a constant need to reiterate and remind the viewer of what they last did, how they felt about it, and how much they've overcome their trauma since doing the thing they last did. However, where it counts, in the role-playing, I think Avowed succeeds pretty damn well. I know the Outer Worlds gets a lot of slack, but the one thing I always thought that game did well, and Obsidian clearly know how to handle, is the actual role-playing part of RPGs. In the dialogue, in the player action consequence dynamic, and in the branches this can create in the narrative. Whatever we give ourselves as a character origin will almost always allow for unique dialogue choices and paths this can open. But even that aside, there is a welcome diversity of responses and solutions to the vast majority of dialogue encounters. You can wholeheartedly and consistently play this game beginning to end as an endearing Imperial loyalist through and through. You can lean into being a wise court mystic, like I did, or as someone openly and admittedly making it up as they go along, and there will so often be just the right response you want to embody that character. There is nothing worse in an RPG than being met with 3 responses, all of which are some variety of yes, yes, sarcastically, yes, angrily. You've all seen this before, haven't we? Fallout 4. And yet none of them are something that your character would say, or indeed, what you want to say. Maybe you want to say, no, fuck off. I found it pretty seamless, personally, to embody my envoy, especially when it came to some legitimately tough choices in the game, none of which I will spoil, but there are several big, game-changing dilemmas, and I would find myself at these points, putting down the controller to mull over each option and consequences of what they might entail, though often knowing intuitively, simply through asking, what would my character do, how I'm leaning. Again, I compare this to Veilguard, which, despite far more apocalyptic, grand-scale stakes, never once gave me that feeling. Choices instead feeling quite binary and ultimately meaningless. Do we sacrifice Town A or Town B? Really just coming down to which companion we like more. Avowed has this game-long mystery, barely, keeping you on your toes regarding the voice in your head, who is constantly shifting from benevolent sage guide to eldritch horror entity, innocent being to malicious deceiver. Your conversations with this entity can mould its own sense of right and wrong, though you can expect to have your own words used against you down the line. And ultimately, the dilemma of what to do about this voice is a big one. The right and wrong choices aren't always obvious, and your companions, a bright spot in the story, will come to quite aggressively chafe with your decisions at times. Though, importantly, and a credit to the dialogue once again, you can always argue with them about their disagreements. Like, there is nothing worse. I'm just going to use Veilguard as an example again. Like, I'm sorry, Nev, that I decided to go to this other town to help them out instead of yours. But, like, one of them was going to get nuked by a dragon. I sent other dudes to help your people. You already have a big defending garrison, a bunch of mages. I thought you could handle it. It seemed like a perfectly logical decision, right? Why can't I tell that to the character? Instead, the only dialogue option I ever have is to go, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I won't do it again. Please forgive me. No, argue with the bitch. No, I like being able to stick to your guns as a character and not feel like the writers themselves are trying to guilt trip me for picking the least bad option in a difficult dilemma. You can go like, no, I stand by my decision. I think I'm glad that I destroyed a historical artifact instead of sacrificing a bunch of random civilians. That actually, to me, seems a pretty good deal. Fuck you. I went completely off script there, but I stand by every word of that. Let me argue with my companions. So, the role-playing is good. What about the combat systems? Combat? Sucks? Okay, well, it's not my favourite. Melee and firearms weren't all that fun to actually use, I found. While your black powder type guns are powerful, they are understandably slow to reload. That's fine, in theory. I don't want machine guns. But good god, does that just make them boring to use? You know, a holdout weapon, something to begin an engagement with before moving in? Understandable, but I could not imagine relying on these as your primary weapon for long. For me, I fell into spellcasting with a piffy little wand, which made me feel like a bit of a tit, admittedly. I mean, magic staff, cool wizard coded. Hand casting, that's Dragon Ball shit. Wands? Turf. But a few spell levels in, coupled with upgraded, synergizing companion abilities, and there's just enough utility here, with status effect build-up, movement and crowd control, gravity magic, and more, that it became enjoyable to actually engage with. Still, there is this weird MMO-iness to the average combat encounter that really does feel more like Elder Scrolls Online than Skyrim. Worst is the enemy movement, which will have dudes sliding across the battlefield at max speeds to perform some altitude-defying AoE attack or whatever. But arguably even worse is how almost every single combat encounter inevitably devolves into either a skeleton horde or a random bear attack. Taking out a 5-dude bandit camp? Suddenly, 10 dudes and 6 bears. Walked into a graveyard? 500 skeletons. And a bear. Oh good, you took on that bounty to kill the old grizzly up the road? 500 skeletons. And a bear. Be prepared for the most mobbish mob fights you've ever seen, because that is 90% of all combat in this game. If there's one thing though that Avowed has that I would point to that make it stand out from others in its genre, what it has to give as an RPG, besides, you know, the specifics of the story and the dialogue that I've already mentioned, It would actually, surprisingly, be the mobility. The parkour in this game is not only very functional, with a first-person perspective dodge system, which you don't see very often, though incidentally we'll also be seeing that again very soon, but it's implemented quite well into the layout of dungeons, underground caves, caverns and ruins. There's a nice Acrobatics 100 quality to jumping across rooftops and battlements in towns, and plenty of otherwise standard locations will have hidden platforming challenges, up towers or down cliffsides. Finally, and I can't sign off before making this clear, the game is stunning. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise, with some legitimately jaw-dropping vistas, with a visual design which, while maybe not to everyone's palate, is undeniably strong. Less so, though, are some of the character and armour designs. Like, take our companion Fishman Kai, voiced by Brendan Keener of Garrus Vicarian fame. You know, he's a striking, unique-looking fella. I like him a lot. Then you meet the broccoli-haired freaks that make up the rest of his people, and why do they have hair? I thought they were fish! But my main critique of the visuals has to be the armors, which will, unfortunately, have a disproportionate sway on whether I replay your video game or not. If I can't fashion Souls it up, then I ain't going to be compelled to start a fresh new full heavy armor run, or a lace and leather rogue, based on the look of the gear alone. And unfortunately, the armor designs here do feel obligatory, more than anything inspired. Oh, we need an armor for our evil Templars faction. I don't know, just put him in the most bog-standard steel plate known to man. Now, don't mistake me for saying that the armor and outfits look boring for looking bad. I was actually quite impressed at times by the detailing of the straps mounting pauldrons to plate, but, end of the day, I will always take an unrealistic, unconstructible armor set over Johnny's first Renaissance Festival fit. But, even with good armor designs, would I rush back to the Living Lands? Am I, in fact, the living man? Yeah, no. Avowed is not by any stretch a bad game. In fact, I kind of wish it did better. But, like I said at the start, I just doubt I'll think much on it beyond this video. I might, maybe, go back and give Pillars of Eternity another go, now with a bit more context for the setting, and I wouldn't dissuade any fan of fantasy RPGs from giving Avowed a shot. It's fine. It's well made. It's maybe just a little bit underwhelming. No, I was whelmed. I was whelmed. Just the right amount. Avowed left me whelmed. That'll do. Are those mushrooms on a school trip? Oh no. I can't believe the game is making me do this. I can't believe the game has left me no choice but to do this. The mighty empire of Adir exporting its superior culture to the rest of the world. Finally, the oppressed mushrooms of the living land can enjoy the school shootings we have at home. Who said this game was without edge? Tainted Grail, Fall of Avalon. More like, tainted my opinion of the game, full of AI slop. Maybe. Possibly. To be honest, the evidence is so-so and the jury's still out. But that opening line made me laugh when I wrote it, so it stays. Fall of Avalon is yet another Elder Scrolls-like first-person RPG, this time based loosely on a dark fantasy retelling of Arthurian legend. Basically, if Avowed is critical role fantasy, then this is BBC Scotland's Raven fantasy.
Each of you will lose a life.
The second release from developer Questline Studios, only after their 2021 mobile deck builder Tainted Grail Conquest, it's hardly AAA budget, yet I was intrigued the moment I saw it, looking like a bastard child of Skyrim and Dark Souls. Dark Souls 2, specifically, just on account of the slightly off-brand vibe of everything. Or maybe just the surprise Desert Sorceress cameos. Hey, I'm just happy she found work after Drangleic. But, okay, yeah, before I can actually talk about the game itself, I do need to address what I opened the review with. As someone viscerally concerned with the use of generative AI in creative mediums, and oh, this won't be the last time this topic comes up in this video, Tainted Grail forces me into a little bit of a dilemma here. Do I present to you, my audience, a game, potentially even singing its praises, without doing my due diligence in pointing out its very plausible use of Gen AI. Yet, if I do so, might I run the risk of wrongly maligning an otherwise innocent game for which, while there is some evidence, nothing is actually confirmed? And obviously, where opposition to AI art should be, in part, about protecting and celebrating real artistry, I sure as hell don't want to diminish the human-made work here, of which there is still certainly plenty. But here's the long and short. Polish board game company Awaken Realms, who own both this IP and their digital branch Questline, have a history of using Gen AI in their other products. This, from what I've seen, ain't in dispute. Even the company's own clearing the air statement on their AI usage stopped well short of denial. Oh, don't worry guys, we only use an internal stable diffusion model as a tool, and every final product released will at some point have been worked on by human artists, whatever the fuck that means. So, while their board games are compromised, the digital side is a bit hazier, with no official statement from the devs and online opinion very much split between all text and dialogue is 100% written by ChatGPT, source, I know it when I see it, trust me bro, and who cares, AI good actually, herdider. Either way, not very helpful. ChatGPT and AI image detection software is imperfect, and while I did test a few bestiary entries and UI elements, which did come back more suspicious than not, who honestly can know for sure. The main suspect I see pointed to was this Roman-style wall mural in Act 2's Kunacht, which had these dodgy sausage fingers, but these were either patched out by the time I got there or simply used different assets entirely on console. Worse to me though is even the suspicion now that any of the game's writing, journal entries, in-game books, hell god forbid dialogue, was AI generated. Just the very idea of looking to Elder Scrolls as inspiration, with its literal libraries of in-game tomes, journals, novels, all written up by Kirkbride, Rolston and more, and then going, hey, we can do that. I don't want to put any effort in though. Well, let's just say that the company behaviour, only revealed to me mid-playthrough, tainted the experience. Which, gotta say, is unfortunate, because I didn't dislike the game. As a self-described dark fantasy, all the usual grimdark tropes are present. Crumbling ruins of a kingdom past its prime, plague and death corrupting the land, human experimentation, religious zealots, dead baby skeletons, booby pin-ups, and all this just in the first corridor of the tutorial dungeon. Playing the demo earlier in 2025, I'll admit that this Asylum Escape opening didn't really sell me on the whole thing, largely down to the combat clunkiness. Player actions are very slow, yet enemies deceptively fast. Some real hammer horror. How do these shuffling corpses keep closing distance so fast when I'm zooming all over the place? Said zooming was one of the more interesting innovations it seemed to make over the standard Skyrim-style combat I was used to. A first-person perspective dodge, though, unlike Avowed, you can dash in every direction, which is great, but also can be a lot to get a handle on. It's not the dodge timing, which is a joke, allowing you to almost never take a hit, but the movement itself launches you so far beyond your opponent, I'd be having to jog back into bonking range to make any use of any counter I'd bought myself with it. That's assuming the jump to warp didn't send us careening off a castle wall. If Avowed's dodge is a quick sidestep, Grail's is a DBZ Zenkai boost. By adopting Dark Souls-style dodge and parry combat, but without that third-person perspective camera or a lock-on, instead of rolling around enemies to stab their flank, we'll straight-line dash well past whatever we're fighting, panic to reacquire target, then, realising they've already caught up and are swinging at us, zoom to another random patch of ground. Rinse and repeat as you chip away at their exorbitant health bar. At least this was my experience doing any melee, which was ditched for magic at the earliest opportunity. And frankly was the best decision I could have ever made for my enjoyment. Shout out to that one spell that explodes corpses Diablo Necromancer style. You got me through Act 1 and felt like a rare bit of that Elder Scrolls sandbox silliness that I really needed. There is a parry system, but given how ridiculously generous your dodge is with stamina usage, I failed to see the benefit in a high-risk, low-reward parry which eats that green bar, and in which a missed time could easily let many enemies one-shot you. So, wrangling the combat took me a while, but despite bouncing off the demo, what got me to keep playing in the end was the plot hook, as we find ourselves, accidentally or otherwise, playing host to some fragmentary spirits of the kingdom's long-dead king and hero, Arthur Pendragon. That's right, it's the Johnny Silverhand voice in her head trope again. In retrospect, it's funny just how much this compares to Avowed, which, for the record, I didn't play until after this, but for whatever reason, Grail's take grabbed my interest more. I'm not actually convinced it is the better take of the two by any means. In fact, as I'll get to, the overall thematic point might be gash, but I can't deny it compelled me more while actually playing. While it seems then at first that our quest must be to find the rest of his soul fragments, to resurrect this spikily armoured demigod king for the good of the realm, the only one with the strength, will and symbolic pull to unite this dying kingdom, only for, not 2 steps in, the rug to be pulled by an alternative. Oh no, don't resurrect him, he's a fucking menace! Everything wrong with the world stems from things that he did centuries ago. No, what we need is for you to gather up his soul and snuff him out for good. Thus begins a journey, learning a little more with each artifact about his reign and the difficult, questionable, downright unethical decisions this legendary figure made under the endless pretense of a greater good. Questioning and confronting your spiritual tag-along as you go, all in preparation for passing the final judgment. You know, it's kinda like if, while on the quest to destroy the ring, Frodo Baggins could have round-the-campfire chats with the Dark Lord Sauron, who, as it turns out, is kinda chill, and insists he's just a well-meaning guy who completely disavows all the orcs killing in his name today. As with Avowed, I again feel the need to make clear that despite appearances, this isn't truly like an Elder Scrolls game. While I personally felt it hitting some more of those hard-to-quantify Bethesda beats, those Skyrimisms, than Avowed did, it's still an act-based game, built squarely around you being this character with a sole purpose, get on it, rather than a be your own person, go join a guild, where's your wife, go home to your family dude. But there are some unique quirks to the gameplay worth mentioning. I actually really like that you can set camp anywhere in the world. It's one of those immersive features you'll see modders trying to implement into Fallout or Elder Scrolls. And besides advancing time and leveling up, gives us a chance to prep food and chat with our old buddy the baby killer. Nighttime changes the danger level, as the world beyond the safety of town is drowned in weirdness, upping enemy stats but dropping extra resources. The game's overall look and visual design is hit or miss. I feel like this was a draw for a lot of players, myself included, as something that looked like a smaller studio's attempt at that FromSoft aesthetic. Some armor designs are cool, there is certainly some of that potential for fashion scrailsing, but if I'm being completely honest, it is, on balance, one of the uglier games I've played lately. The characters, animations, environments, it's not a graphics problem, per se, it's more of a case of being a bit bleh. No accounting for taste, I suppose. And while I mention aesthetics, I would have loved to talk about the music, but the 2 main tracks in the game I was raving over were both licensed and won't be getting used in this video for that reason. Still, licensed or not, the overall soundtrack is still pretty good, with heavy dark Norse folk influence. Now, despite liking the gameplay overall, once over that initial clunk at least, I do got a laundry list of gripes. It's pretty inexcusable, outside of an online MMO, to have enemy tethering, at least to this extreme. Maybe I don't want to fight Johnny Big Bollocks on the Bridge of Death, so I lure him out to an open field I've pre-littered with the soon-to-be-exploded corpses of his mates. Classic. Imagine my disappointment when, after whittling down Johnny's health and luring him to this kill box, he moonwalks back to spawn and full fucking health at 90 miles an hour. Go fuck yourself. Now, this wouldn't have been such an annoyance if the game already had any kind of balancing whatsoever. Your average open world bandits might take 3 to 5 hits to kill, pretty reasonable. But named enemies, like Johnny Big Bollocks here, take dozens upon dozens upon dozens of hits. while you, of course, go down in 1 or 2. But fine, level up, get better gear, and eventually Act 1's bosses are a breeze. Step through the gates to Act 2 and get instantly melted by a generic mob creature. Same again into Act 3. But these issues with balance extend beyond combat to affect every aspect of the game's economy. Skill point economy, XP economy, economy. We need to farm resources to upgrade our gear. Sure, okay, but why, oh why, slap a gold tax on top of this resource cost? A tax which increases exponentially per level. Sword does 40 damage, say. Bunch of resources and 400 gold gets me sword plus 1 with 41 damage. More resources and 1000 gold gets me sword plus 2 with 41.5 damage, 2000 gold, 4000, 7000 gold deep, and I'm, what, a few points of damage up and broke? Buying spells, unlocking player homes, transmogging your outfit, upgrading your outfit, everything costs gold, and gold isn't that abundant, I found, at least when playing normally. There's a repeatable bounty hunter quest in Act 1 with gold for every bandit you kill. Wanna guess how much? 10. Meanwhile, it's 50 grand for the home in Connacht, and at least a few million to fully upgrade a set of gear. Better just hope you don't find something you like more later. So, if I can't upgrade my gear, how else do I boost my power? Well, we get a skill point every level, and there's a whole bunch of skill trees, in which any progression feels real incremental. I hunt down and waste every bear I can find in the region, hand in every bounty, do every side quest on my list, and the 2, maybe 3 levels I've gained net me enough points to maybe boost magic power a few %. While your health, melee damage, stamina, summoning skills, critical hit chance, bartering, and so many other skills cry out for attention. Obviously, this is very dependent on your own build, but I felt like I never had enough points. There were always things I needed to improve, and never the points to go around. While the open worlds were pretty nice, with Act 2's easily taking the prize as my favourite, dungeons were very hit and miss, with some, Act 2's Corrupted Temple, I'm looking at you, being incredibly frustrating, with poor lighting and layout making it feel quite amateurish, honestly. The game's inclusion of an unstuck command was a good call, but felt like a crutch for bad design in some places, with inescapable pitfalls and long runbacks to the exit. Hell, Skyrim's dungeons can be tedious for sure, but something Bethesda always made sure to do was have you loop back to the entrance once cleared. Not here though, eh? Lastly, I was going to joke about some of the voice acting, just a light bit of banter at some of the accents, which, could be, interesting at times. But honestly, with the Gen AI concerns suddenly erased elsewhere, I'm just happy these are real people, so no hate here from me. Still gonna joke a bit about it though. Yeah, there are some real bad moments. Never from our buddy Chad Bad Dragon, once again the best part of the game, but at the end of Act 1, for instance, you get this rousing speech from the fort commander to his garrison, and it is so awkward and goes on for so long, constantly cutting back to the same handful of bored-looking troops. It's real surreal, first draft shit.
We will not drain your resources. Especially since I did not share my plans with you earlier. We are securing the safety of the South and our independence from Camelot.
The tribes will provide us with the military support.
But, end of the day, why did I stick with this game despite its glaring flaws? Why, giving it the benefit of the doubt on the Gen AI front, have I ranked it this high on the list, above Avowed even? Ultimately, it came down to the story, which I just found myself surprisingly engaged with. It comes down to the fact that, of the 2 scroll-likes, this is the one I feel I'm more likely to play again. And it comes down to the fact that, despite my enthusiasm, dropping the fuck off in the last act, in part due to the aforementioned allegations, though primarily structural reasons, I was still invested enough to see it through to the end. And was it a satisfying ending? Nah. Bit of spoilers here on out. The game's third and final act feels very half-baked, becoming a complete chore to get through. Questlines within questlines as we run around this Solstheim at home mountaintop of the giants with somehow even less shit going on. Before you can get to the main quest MacGuffin, you must first invite each tribe to a moot. Okay, fine. Aye, scattered to the four corners of the map they are, and from what I've heard, they all got problems needing solving. Okay, yeah, fine. Hello, welcome to the Piss Whittlers tribe. Before we can join the moot, you must acquire a potion to heal our chief. Okay, fine. But to get the potion, you must first perform a ritual fetch quest for each of our shrines. Okay, fine. Aye, scattered to the four corners of the map they are, and guarded each by a mini-boss. Okay, Jesus Christ, fine. Ah, you have completed the rituals and healed our chieftain. But I didn't feel your heart was in it, so about the moot, no can do. Oh, go fuck yourselves. From the very start of the game, we have this intrigue around Camelot, the capital, trying, in its fears of the pending apocalypse, to cling to power with an iron fist. We see its legions around the world, dealing with the intimidating Sir Galahad the Butcher and a hell of a grindy boss to cap off Act 1, and the whole time I'm thinking like, fuck, when are we going to get to this capital? What will it be like? Who, if not Arthur, is in charge? What of the Red Priests, these zealots whose island prison we began the game in? Will our claim to carry Arthur's soul be questioned? Deemed heretical? Celebrated? Well, turns out all that was a waste of speculation, because we never even visit the fucking place. We never get our third act Anor Londo moment, our Lindell. No, we end the game doing chores for goat fuckers, then run a single 10-minute dungeon. After the initially compelling setup, the final choice fell a little flat for me. We might free Arthur's soul, giving both him respite and the world a chance to move on and find another path forward, to stop waiting around for salvation from a long-dead hero. We might take the mantle ourselves and carve a, hopefully, better path, learning from all of Arthur's mistakes. We might bring him back as he was, for better and worse. Or we might let it all burn. Tee-hee, ha-ha, I am Caradoc, I am very smart. But whichever choice you make, the confrontations and conclusions around them feel a bit stunted. Like, Arthur goes from total despondence at everything he's done, regret for the atrocities, regret for the fact that after everything he did, what he built never even lasted, to a shouty tyrant demanding the throne. Mine, mine, mine. There's a bit of pseudo-intellectual nonsense rehashing that hard times, strong men, hard men, fuck men line that Joe Rogan types love to employ, but it seems misplaced coming from Arthur, the strong man in this equation, having since come to terms with the fact that he basically cocked everything up. Meanwhile, the Caradoc path, the main proponent of kill Arthur, turns out, last minute, was never really about clearing the way for fresh leaders and visions to flourish. No, instead he was more like somebody's poorly understood anarchist strawman. I'm fine if this leads to the end of the world, as long as there's no more kings. I don't know about that one, dude. Like, there's also a bunch of normal people in the world just living their lives, farming and shit. I'm just not sure that Avalon knew what it wanted to say about leadership, about messiah figures, heavy wears the crown and all that. Like, at times, it seemed to be making the Frank Herbert argument against charismatic central leaders. But then you choose the ending where Arthur returns, and the 90-second cutscene basically says, "And all was well under the once and future king," unless you didn't do any side quests, in which case, probably not, but we're mostly leaving it to your imagination. In the end, whether I could recommend Tainted Grail is a little bit up in the air. As a game, it has something going for it, but personally, had I known about the parent company's Gen AI shenanigans beforehand, I may well have given it a miss. While, needless to say, any confirmed use of Gen AI would have knocked this well down the rankings from where it is. But, like I said, it's a game which still sparks just a flicker of intrigue in me. The allure of going in for a heavy tank armor build, or a right dickhead evil playthrough, lingering just enough that I can't dismiss it entirely as one of the more memorable games I played last year, even if not for all the right reasons.
Hey,
Care to humor an old soldier with a friendly spar? That's the spirit.
System Shock 2 25th Anniversary Remaster. From the Remaster. Masters at Night Dive Studios. So, I had never played the original System Shock 2. Nor System Shock, for that matter. I was aware of its grand pappy status in the immersive sim genre, of the influences it's had on game design, and of Shodan's impact on so many villainous characters going forward. But, for the most part, I went in completely blind. Now, admittedly, you could not have set me off on a better footing for this game, having just done a first full playthrough of the original Bioshock before this, Ken Levine's later spiritual successor with a lot of shared DNA, though while I didn't really care much for Bioshock, as sacrilegious as that must sound to some, I know, I think I'm actually in love with this game. Well, until the final couple chapters anyway, but we'll talk about this game as a game in a bit. As a remaster, Night Dive once again does not disappoint. I've had absolute faith in these guys for a while now, across their Turok 1 through 3 remasters, Star Wars Dark Forces, and quick editor's note, I've actually purchased their System Shock 1 remake. It was actually on sale like right now, and I will probably start playing that as soon as I'm done here, I guess. It runs fluidly and beautifully. Textures are sharp and clear without, importantly, detracting from the art style of the original. Enemy and weapon models are much improved, again while remaining faithful to the original intent. Now aesthetically, I should say I was all about this game right out of the first loading screen. It's Half-Life 1, it's Deus Ex, it's a little bit Alien vs Predator of the same year, though while visual updates and alterations are there, the vibe is perfectly retained. Plus, any old heads listening ought to be relieved to know that this remaster did absolutely nothing to alleviate the completely alienating UI, or make the complex mechanics any more approachable for new players. Wait, a French what device? Basically, it does everything you would want a good update to do, without going too far. In a lot of ways, despite what I might have said about Oblivion, an ideal remaster succeeds by almost going unnoticed. You want it to feel as if you're playing the game for the first time in 1999 in this case, with improvements either being under the hood or so well incorporated that you don't think twice about the fact that the assault rifle you're using is actually an entirely different weapon, simply because this is how your brain remembered it looking back then. Only through extreme familiarity or by doing a side-by-side comparison should you be able to see the differences. Which is convenient in our case, because this particular release actually allows us to do just that, by bundling in the original unchanged game at no extra cost. Yes please, that's what I want to see. In the many, far too many times I've discussed the subject of remasters on stream or with friends, the question of games preservation inevitably comes up. For the record, I clearly take no issue with remasters or remakes in principle, but the fear that these either exist to, or by virtue of simply being, will override the original releases is a common refrain I hear again and again. A common example being the Resident Evil remasters, which had us long questioning why the hell wouldn't Capcom also just sell us the original games in an easily accessible way? Do they want to pretend like those originals don't exist or something? Since then, we have gotten them on GOG and PSN, and just a month or two, hopefully, before this video goes live, on Steam, so hey, another win for preservation. Which brings us back to why I love this. If possible, when you're going to sell us a remaster of a game, please do include the original as well. If not as a graphical toggle like Halo MCC did with the older games, then just as a separate installation like this. It's just good practice. Now, a caveat that did seem to cause some upset online. This original game, which was already available on Steam for around £7, was actually delisted in conjunction with this release. Now obviously, those who already owned it still have access to it, but any future purchases would need to be done through the pricier modern remaster, around £24. Now, I can see the business sense to this, avoiding confusion and accidental purchases by having two different versions for sale at once, But ultimately, whether this is seen as locking that original game behind an additional purchase, or as bundling the original game as a nice little free gimme, depends on your perspective. Now, as a game, System Shock 2 fucks. I will admit, I almost dropped it. Not that much beyond the tutorial, actually. Only going back to it once or twice in a vain attempt to figure out where the hell I was meant to go and what the hell I was doing, all while being screamed at by security cameras and one-shotted by endless waves of pipe-wielding freaks and little monkey fellas. But I don't know what possessed me to hop back in for one final half-arsed attempt before binning it off and writing a far less comprehensive review, when something clicked. Next thing I know, 11 hours had passed. After an Earthbound tutorial, choosing our Space Marine career path and building out a portfolio between combat specialist, hacker, or space magic fields, we wake up 3 years later on the Von Braun deep space vessel, our memories lost, the ship's AI running amok, and horrible mutants hunting the crew. The Bioshock 1 progenitor cells are obvious right away, with audio logs and the voice in your ear telling you what to do, and it's both surprising and obviously not very how much the later games actually take from this. But, speaking personally, obviously, I was way more invested in the Von Braun, Dr. Polito, Delacroix, and the overall villains, plural, dynamic here than I ever was with any of the Citizens of Rapture, Atlas, Sea Slugs, Atlas Slugged. Sorry, I know, sacrilege, Andrew Ryan, greatest Vimeo game villain, would you plot twist kindly, etc. But damn it if the audio logs and constant yap in that game didn't drive me nuts. Whereas, the unravelling mystery and very logical deductions we are allowed to make here paid off in much more straightforwardly satisfying ways, and less like Ken Levine was trying to get one over on us. Also, it gave me a fuzzy feeling whenever Shodan would call me a pathetic little insect, and maybe I should investigate this further.
Now, get to the bridge. Here are some more upgrade modules.
I enjoy watching your transformation into my own image, insect.
Right now, my feelings on this game are close to 10 out of 10, but there are a few things holding it back. There's no getting around the UI being awkward as hell, quest objectives, audio logs, weapon repair, research records, all being scattered around these different toggles, are far from intuitive. The complex mechanics are a hurdle, certainly. I deliberately just ignored psi powers entirely to keep it simple with tech and guns, though you are required by the story to at least do a little bit of hacking and research, both of which needing some limited cyber modules to be put into these skills. The game is totally playable like this, though there are some glaring issues of balance with the other skills. Like the photography in Bioshock, you can research body parts looted from fallen enemy types to gain damage boosts and learn weaknesses, though for most of the game you can get by with the bare minimum at single point in this skill. But then, without much build-up to it, you'll be suddenly drowning in high-level, wacky alien gear during the endgame, by which time your build has probably been set in stone, all of which require a high level of research just to figure out how to use, plus a high level of the exotic weapon skill stat to equip, which itself doesn't even unlock until halfway through the game. Repair and maintenance, despite being practical synonyms, are two separate skills. The weapon degradation is bad enough, but finding out you've neither the maintenance skill high enough to patch up your gun, or repair to fix it when it breaks entirely, is an annoying one. Sometimes finding that the optimal solution is to just use it to destruction, then repair it back up to a minimum functioning state each time. Platforming is pretty goddamn arse. Now, it's hardly a regular feature of the game, but whenever it did show its fat, punchable face, it straight up pissed me off. More than once, I'd get stuck in the environment behind some piece of bedroom furniture, or find that there's just this annoying step, ledge, or window frame just a fraction too small to hop through first try. Still, it wasn't really till the late game chapters where I really noticed how bad it could be. Don't get me started on that fucking torpedo launcher room, had to cheese that one in the end. I know you can ledge grab in this, Problem is, the first and last time that was relevant was the basic movement tutorial back on Earth, and I had completely forgotten it was even a feature till I was stuck in the bottom of an inescapable pit on the final goddamn chapter. Like genuinely about 3 minutes from credits. On that note, the final chapters were a noticeable dip in quality for me. From being just a bit too maze-like, to full-on shittier versions of the already kinda shitty Zen levels from Half-Life, with wacky geometry and fleshy doodads making the already annoying platforming just plain aggravating. Also, what's with all the fucking flies? Every other room I enter, it's like, you have alerted the flies. Proceed to run around in a circle for the next half minute until they finally die from boredom. Just annoying. Like, stop. Stop wasting my time.
Everywhere I turn, he's in my way. It cost me my job, my reputation, my health, my apartment.
Also wasting my time, I really didn't appreciate it pulling once or twice what seemed to be the branching story path, a second optional objective, like, say, go meet X in location Y, only to discover after an hour of backtracking and searching and double and triple checking the message that it was actually a different location Y that we haven't actually got to yet, and it's not a branch at all, and it's just something that will happen regardless by progressing the plot. I imagine that most people who've played System Shock 2 know what I'm referring to, because based on the results of my frustrated googling of the problem at the time, it seems like a damn common communication breakdown between the designers and the player in this instance. Still, all that aside, an incredible game, excellently remastered, and with fair warning going in that it does require a bit to get over that initial "what am I doing?" It's a strong recommend for lovers of that 90s dark engine or source shooter vibe, or if you got on with Bioshock or 2017's Prey even, which certainly took a lot of inspiration from here. Just bloody great, and honestly maybe the most engaging game I played all year, practically finishing it in a single sitting. Just iconic. Oh, and I almost forgot, the voice acting? Oscar-worthy.
He told me how to make a weapon that would help us against our enemies. And here's the thing, it's made of worms. It even fires worms.
It's made of worms. It's made of worms. And it stings like you wouldn't believe. It's made of worms.
But it stings like you wouldn't believe.
Primal Planet is an excellent solo-developed light Metroidvania, or Dinovania as developer Seething Swarm dubbed it, about family, survival, dinosaurs, and aliens. And it was surprisingly great. Compared to the other 2D platforming Metroidvania I played this year, it was refreshingly welcoming and highly accessible, beatable in 6 to 8 hours fairly handily, making it a bite-sized adventure, but one which veterans of the genre will probably find lacking in challenge or mechanical complexity. With a cutesy pixel art style and entirely silent storytelling, there are just enough unexpected twists and turns and reversals that I actually do want to avoid spoilers for a game overloading with heart about the importance of family, whether hominid or saurian. The character and creature art is fantastic. I know it might sound silly for a cutesy pixelated game, which in no way ought to be aiming for scientific accuracy, but I was genuinely impressed by the prehistoric creature designs. Legitimately, some of the best designs of an Allosaurus, Carnotaurus and more that I've seen in a game. Apologies, Deathground. The only mild critique I might levy at the visuals is how busy the environments can be, especially with multiple companion NPCs, including our friendly co-op partner dinosaur, hopping around and fending off a pack of very similar looking dinosaurs or hostile humans. The accessibility options do allow for at least our dinosaur pal, who again can actually be controlled by a player 2 in offline couch co-op, to be more distinctly highlighted. But either way, this is me scraping the bottom of the barrel for points of criticisms here, in a game which is generally very generous in healing and respawn. So while it was something I noted, I could hardly say it contributed to any genuine frustrations. While I bring up healing, the holistic hunter-gatherer experience is here, with us stripping carcasses for meat and bone, scrounging for healing fruit and multicoloured flowers and berries. Cooking meat at a fire provides our main healing sustenance, though we can always risk food poisoning by chowing down it raw. Plants will eventually be used for unlockable items like antidote, water breathing, or instant fire, as well as in cave painting, as we chronicle our adventures in colour. Playing with a controller on PC made for some excellent fluid mobility controls, as you roll, jump, sprint and wall hop across this sprawling jungle world. Now, I don't claim to be anything close to a Metroidvania guru, but I will say Primal Planet's world map does feel especially granular, making it pretty hard for you to get your head around. Another game in the genre might give us a jungle biome area with a clear, distinct name. You know, Brinsville or whatever. Then you might go through a loading screen, and eventually it's like, okay, you're clearly in an entirely new area. You're in the water level, Marinia. In Primal Planet, you'll sprint from left to right on the screen and pass through umpteen zone title cards. Moss-grown cave, skyplane plains, Vale's Vale, and you'll still be in the same identical jungle biome. Before transitioning, eventually, once you've passed through grassy lawn hills and corporalite caverns, to a coastal-themed area with its own severally distinctly indistinct named zones. Glomshoal Beach, the Pasty Pale Pass, the Treacherous Trench. Hey, guess what? They're all just open ocean. There is a world map, but it's not the easiest to interpret. I would have liked the ability to zoom in and view the local zone maps of areas besides the one I'm currently in, for purposes of checking what I haven't fully explored yet. But, end of the day, it's not the largest or most difficult world to navigate. So, while you might waste a bit of time running from one end to another, it's not exactly unmanageable. And just as well, because I found I was running from one end to the other quite a bit towards the late game, where it wasn't entirely clear what my immediate next objective was. And again, I put this down in large part to the world design, and, ironically, the more accessible Metroidvania-like nature of the game. See, another similar game might present you with an underwater area, but communicate clearly that you cannot access this without a dive module or whatever. Okay, duly noted, I'll file that away in my memory for later. Primal Planet will present us with an entire ocean to explore pretty early on, with the only limit being our lung capacity. This is great on paper, giving the player maximum freedom and minimal restrictions can only be good. Right? Well, in the same way I kind of appreciate seeing locked doors in Resident Evil because it narrows down how much I can explore at that time, what this freedom of the ocean communicates is that there must be something to do in this area, some key to find, some boss to progress the story, but the reality is, no, we actually have no business here at all until the endgame, and we're very liable to then waste our time looking for a plot hook here, only to hit dead end after dead end before eventually finally giving up and moving elsewhere. I actually did fear I'd soft-locked myself exploring this area too early on, hitching a ride on a friendly dolphin to reach its furthest depths, only for the cetaceous cunt to despawn when I rested at a bonfire, trapping me at 4,000 fathoms, repeatedly drowning and respawning at this same point, as I desperately searched for scattered air bubbles and a way back to the surface. Once you've exhausted all exploration and found nothing but alien tech doors and burnable brambles, story progress will require a bit of light settlement building, as you rescued scattered villagers and acquire the necessary skills from them, but only after returning to base to expend resources on their huts. I didn't realise this at first, so did find myself at a bit of a loss, having already rescued everyone but finding myself no further forward in the story. This lack of clear direction at times is especially pointed when, after completing the main goal of the game and saving your family, it just kind of drifts onwards without any punctuation, No credit roll, no sense of finality, you just kinda carry on playing, only now without any clear goal. Now, okay, there is another objective, but I feel if they wanted the player to stay invested, to play the post-game, find all the alien keys, unlock all the portals, make this clear as the secret bonus true ending after some credits, or even just a fade to black, wake up the next day back at the village as an unspoken, the adventure continues, there's still more to do. As it stands, it just feels oddly inconclusive. Even so, a very enjoyable indie game that I'd handily recommend to anyone of almost any skill level, and a healthy appreciation for the prehistoric, warranted you aren't exactly looking for the next Hollow Knight in terms of challenge. Abiotic Factor. At a glance, this looks like just my kind of game. Heavily inspired by the original Half-Life, which, if you know me, is among my top favourite, and, along with Blue Shift, Opposing Force, Decay, and multiplayer mods like Sven Co-op, by far my most replayed games of all time. Seemingly tailor-made for me then, with the critical caveat that despite everything going in its favour, artistically and thematically, Abiotic was yet another multiplayer crafting survival friend slop game. Or perhaps a friend gem? Let us discuss. So, this is an interesting one for me to talk about. I actually had a full, somewhat lamenting write-up based on 3 or 4 hours of solo play, which, between this and Deathground, really starts to look bad. I do have friends. Honest. However, I would eventually have an almost 180 on the game, which I will get to, but I still think it's valuable to first see what cracks playing solo might expose in the game's intended fun factor. Creating our highly original scientist character, we begin our shift at the Gate Cascade Research Facility, deep in the Australian outback. After a quick safety induction class, we head deeper into the labs, where, through experimenting with interdimensional portal technology, an outbreak of hostile xenomorphic organisms has spread throughout the facility, just in case it can't be made any clearer that this is just Half-Life in the Southern Hemisphere. The vibes to this end are near immaculate. Near, with the blocky nonsensical architecture and incomprehensible layout of these facilities perfectly capturing that labyrinthine nature of Black Mesa, with ventilation shafts to nothing, ceiling hidey holes, locker rooms, janitor closets, and random chasms, all making for some excellent explorative gameplay, scrounging for items and evading monsters. The game comes with a sense of humour, with some of the dialogue, the quirky corporate jingles, and the absurdity of some of the items we will craft ourselves. But here is the one area where it falters just a little bit for me in the presentation. I mean, it is almost unavoidable. There was always going to be a marked difference between a game taking notes and trying to emulate the 1998 Half-Life game, with 2 decades of meme culture behind it, versus the original article, which was just naturally, effortlessly, kind of unintentionally hilarious. Half-Life didn't have jokes. It didn't have the scientists wink at the camera before screaming down a hallway to explode into giblets. You know, it was ostensibly a horror game, one which was having fun and happy to get silly with it, but not itself a comedy or a parody. Abiotic is much more straightforward parody, and yet for every instance I felt it was forcing a joke, it would turn around and whiplash me with the most straight-faced, deadpan line reads known to man. "Oh, I'm a dying man. I got shot. Ruptured me lung. Just gonna bleed out. Alone. In the dark. Next to me forklift. Tell me wife. The power cells." Which brings me to, and I do feel bad saying this, the voice acting. It's not great.
I'm keeping an eye on it because someone's got to. And Frey could kill me if something went wrong. Things are bad enough already.
But more importantly, it's not the right kind of bad either. It's less Harry S. Robinson's hamming it up, and more modders with bad accents and no pop filter.
My friend, this is no place for the careless. I need to get to the surface tunnel, but the soldiers are waiting.
Good evening.
I'm sure of it.
Power
I heard screams.
I unironically think the tone would have been better served with fewer distinct voices, cutting down this cast of 30 plus to like 10? I mean, the original Half-Life had 5, but keeping it hammy. Light, but never too self-aware.
But you need to head through the mines to the surface tunnel. There's no reason to stick around here.
There is a story, there is a plot, there is lore, and to my surprise even, it does stray off the beaten track of Half-Life with its not barnacles, not headcrabs, and not vortigaunts. Nortigaunts, even if only to join the somehow even more beaten track of SCP at home. But honestly, I wasn't here for the story. I was here to explore labs, see wacky creatures, kill and eat said wacky creatures. Gotta feed the youngins. So, how about that actual gameplay then? Well, while there is overarching linear objectives you're expected to work through, it's more of a go-at-your-own-pace kind of game. Establish yourself a base, take days at a time looting all that a sector's worth before eventually moving on. I realised by the end of my doomed solo run that I probably didn't fully appreciate the pace the game was expecting me to go, especially being so handicapped on how many tasks I could realistically do per day. You know, how many resources I could scavenge and carry back to base, how many things I could build, etc, etc. But truth is, the reality of the piss and shit meter survival gameplay just became frustration, reaching a point where there was simply too much to do and never enough time. So, we've just entered the lab, getting to grips with the basics, learning the lay of the land, locating weapons and essential items, while casually hitting main objectives as we go. To progress the story further, I need a hacking tool. To build one, I need to destroy security bots and loot their CPUs. To have a chance at defeating the bots, lacking any real weapons, I figure I should build traps, so I have to roam around hunting for the myriad components I need, returning to camp each time I run out of carry capacity, which is often. The traps need power, so I need to find a power socket. Power sockets turn off at night, which is when the security bots are active, so I need to build a battery pack. Battery packs require an energy cell, so I need to scrounge the parts for an energy cell while also scrounging parts for the battery pack. Oh no! After spending the past half an hour smashing up every desktop PC I can find, my hammer has broken now. So, time to go scrounge the parts for another melee weapon, to scrounge the parts, to build the battery, to power the trap, to kill the thing, to scrounge the part. Oh, and while we've been doing all this, I've become close to starvation. Well, okay, what can I eat? I can scrounge dollars for vending machine snacks, which buy me an extra, I don't know, minute of survival time. Well, that's no good. So now I have to start thinking sustainability. I need a cooking stove, so I need the parts for a stove. So I need a hammer to smash computers to find the parts to build a stove. Not having had time or an explanation to figure out the rules around cooking in the game, all I can see in my food crafting menu are irradiated alien sausages. Well, I have salt, I have biomatter, I have anti-rad pills, but it says I need peccary chops. What's a peccary? I check the bestiary, identify the creature, then scrounge the parts to craft a crossbow to hunt the thing. Oh good, we did it. Almost died in the process, so now I need to scrounge the parts to craft a healing item. Add that to the fucking to-do list. But, oh no, I need a kitchen knife to harvest the meat. So, literally starving to death, I roam around to scrounge a knife to harvest the meat to return to camp to craft some sausages. But, oh no! The peccary didn't actually drop peccary chops, just ordinary radioactive meat, and now I have seconds to live. So I swallow my pride, hold my nose, chow down on some iodine pills, and eat the raw alien leg, and all I get is an extra 30 seconds added to my starvation timer before throwing up and dying. I just wanted the fucking hack tool. So, ready to pack it in and call it a day, I determined that solo play, and maybe survival crafters as a genre, just ain't my cup of tea. But that's hardly satisfying, is it? So, I delete that world, resettle my spectacles, tighten my ridiculous tie, and prepare the summoning circle to bring unto me a fellow scientist. Enter Vincent.
Aim for the head if you can find it. I got another one.
With my brains and your brawn, we'll make an excellent team. Wouldn't you like to get these nuts
Knowing the pitfalls ahead of time now, I lead us through the office complex, grabbing things I know we'll need ahead of time, and within an hour, at most, we're already caught up to the robot hunting objective of my solo attempt. Even now though, things still aren't completely smooth sailing. Food and water are absolute stresses in the early game, to a point where it actually feels a bit arse backwards from a game design perspective. But I have to guess this is sort of par for the course in survival games, as it takes time to get vegetable plots and fresh water sources and all that junk established. Even so, I'll add here that maybe after 12 hours of playing together and showing Security Chief Vincent everything I knew, he attempted a solo run himself and, even with our combined foreknowledge, still found it, to quote him directly, a genuine nightmare.
Like, I remember at the time of our first co-op session thinking, why hasn't Steven set up a bloody cooking station yet? You can't. You've got 100 other fucking things to do. I am not wasting any time, yet it keeps hitting 9 PM.
Now there does come a point though, once you're not at constant risk of starvation, and have an actual weapon or two capable of damage, things do start to fall into place. And the game, well, actually begins. Or maybe an entirely new game starts in its place. Once that stress is lifted, the crafting and base building becomes pretty damn fun. From cable management and decoration to alien barbecue and defending against nighttime raids. Venturing out into the depths of the facility, it absolutely does check the second of my Half-Life criteria after presentation, and that's the exploration. I want to feel lost in the bowels of a corporate beast, so vast and unknowable that not one employee was ever supposed to know everything going on within its steel and concrete walls. The third check on my list would be the gunplay, which is obviously stellar in Half-Life, but while it is a feature here in Abiotic Factor, it's understandably not the focus for the most part. The combat itself leaning in more on improvised tools, scrounging survival, and scarcity. Like, don't get me started on trying to find 9mm ammo in the early parts of the game. Like, it'll take you 12 shots to kill one soldier who will drop 4. Like, do the math. Unlike your average Black Mesa inductee with their obligatory weapons training on the hazard course, we gate facility scientists barely know the arse end of a Glock, with weapon handling skills taking time to build up, and eventually unlock access to more advanced and heavier hitting tools. In fact, there are a ton of skills which grow with use, are adjusted from the start by your scientist's background, and can be absolutely exploited. Just walk around doing your daily tasks with an entire 3-piece sofa in your bag, and you'll level strength in no time. Anyway, that's more or less Abiotic Factor. And while it seemed simultaneously designed just for me, and to make me bounce off at maximum velocity, I, or should I say we, are still actively playing it. It's outright hostile to beginners, and I'd forewarn anyone playing solo to almost go in with the mindset that your first run may be a doomed practice, and to be at peace with the idea of starting fresh if it all goes to hell before you've even found your footing. But it did become an interesting, fairly unique experience for me that I'm still enjoying my sessions in today.
Have you been able to get the beverage machine to work yet?
Hey. Hey. Still kicking, eh?
Warning. The safety rating of this sector is now -4.
Elden Ring Nightreign is the standalone co-op expansion to 2022's Red Scott Gaming Game of the Year, and also some other awards here and there, maybe, I don't know, and compared to the cultural phenomenon of its predecessor, something of a sleeper? While it took me a little while to hop on this particular bandwagon, and wrangle up a few mates in the process, Nightreign is a pretty fucking solid game, and a surprisingly effective innovation on the usual FromSoft Souls formula. If you've been keeping up with me for a while, you've probably seen me grow into, and a little bit out of, love with this genre. I still love Dark Souls 1 and even 2, Bloodborne is a masterpiece, Elden Ring has eaten so many hours of my life, and I would still happily go back to and play it or any of those, but I have struggled to muster up the enthusiasm needed to go cracking open a new, fresh ball-ache, like last year's Wukong, or any of them Lords of P or what have you that have come out in recent years. But what of Nightreign? Maybe it's the familiarity, maybe it's just the novelty of putting Souls gameplay into an entirely different game loop. Maybe it's the co-op experience. Whatever the case, something about this one worked great for me. Even if, as a heavily boldened asterisk here, not necessarily as a long-term commitment. Nightreign puts players in the shoes of one of, currently up to 10 Nightfarers, preset characters from lands and times far and wide, who have through some personal reason or another found themselves tied to the common purpose of defeating the Night Lord, in an all too familiar cryptic narrative of wackawoo nonsense and drawn out depressed dialogue about how the reign of night has descended over Limvale, plunging all into a night reign, if you will. Oh, what do you know? That is the name of the video game. That's just how every NPC talks in these games. So rather than the usual linear RPG structure, game sessions will take the form of a relatively short 40 to 50 minute run over the course of 2 deceptively short in-game days. Choosing your farer and battle bussing your way onto the map, your party of 2 to 3, though solo play is an option. It's certainly an option, I will emphasise, must rush to defeat lesser field bosses, clear ruins, find loot, advance levels, and ultimately cobble together something resembling a functioning build in preparation for each nightfall. The progression of the day is marked by an ever-shrinking boundary wall, which can easily trap you between it and insurmountable cliffs if you aren't paying attention, until you're herded into a nighttime battle with that day's final boss, defeating it to repeat the process for a second day with a second boss and praying by then that you're ready for the true challenge as you face that run's respective Night Lord. But we'll get to them in a bit, because I know that was a lot. It's a very different loop, and I was pleasantly surprised just how well it ended up working. The idea of multiplayer Souls, and I mean actual multiplayer, not the arcane nonsense they have us pull in the standard games, is innately appealing to me. I always love dicking about in these games with a mate. It's a whole other dynamic to solo play, with its own stresses and challenges, but also a lot of fun. However, Nightreign's tight, almost frustratingly so, time limits and the RNG elements in defeating bosses and checking chests in the vain hope of finding the thing you need were off-putting to me when I first heard about them, I'll admit. However, while it's not then just Elden Ring but multiplayer, and it's not what I would have wanted from such a game, what it is ended up being compelling in its own right. Player mobility is ramped up to 11 here, with infinite sprinting, elimination of fall damage, had to really retrain my brain on that one, and a bit of parkour. All a necessity as you'll be bum-rushing objectives across the island, wasting not a second of daylight. Each Nightfarer we can choose from has their own distinct playstyles, special abilities, roles as tank, support or DPS, skins you can buy and unlock for your favourite character. Oh no. It's fantasy operator slop!
You ain't seen nothing yet.
Jokes aside, while I'd hate for preset characters to take over the mainline FromSoft games, I really came around to this a lot. Despite my predilection for big hammer-jumping R2s in the standard game, my personal favourite and go-to main quickly became the Duchess, a fusion dance of Bloodborne's Lady Maria and Dark Souls 3's Firekeeper, who, while pretty low on the base damage, prioritising daggers but with avenues for sorcery, their stopwatch special ability with its time rewind nonsense repeats any damage you've applied to a target over the past few seconds, pairing excellently with fast, nippy daggers with blood or frost or frenzy application, potentially just melting certain enemies with relentless combos paired with well-timed uses of this ability. Now, I liked what other characters I did have proper runs with, but I won't go through every single one of them individually. I know who I liked, and I mostly stuck with them, though the Raider was my first choice for a while, and the DLC introduced the Scholar and Undertaker. And I, for one, am all about that freaky nun. Hard emphasis on freak. Point is, while there is a learning curve for each that can take a bit to master, and there is a degree of build management from the round table home base, allowing you to adjust and improve fares on a character by character basis, I think they did a pretty great job at giving us distinct and functional characters with fun and unique playstyles, not just from one another, but from anything we'd quite be able to make ourselves in base Elden Ring. While the game overall lacks almost any of the meat of base Elden Ring's story or lore, where it makes up for it here are in the personal remembrance quests of each farer. Now, it wouldn't be FromSoft if they didn't make experiencing these storylines as arcane and convoluted as humanly possible, but by achieving a set number of wins as a specific character, you should eventually start rolling these stories forward, as you'll learn more of their backstories, how they came to join the Round Table, and their connections to other members of the party. Like, I actually genuinely found it quite nice to see some actual characterization from what seemed at first to be little more than player archetypes, with the group interacting, or at least implied to be interacting, just enough to not feel like isolated islands of people standing in different corners of the building, refusing to acknowledge the existence of the others. Which is how these Firelink Shrine, Round Table Hold, hub worlds can start to feel in the other games. It's nothing spectacular, mind you, but it is certainly a tier above what we've typically gotten. As for these character quests themselves, they have some problems, with buggy victory conditions and, at least in my case, as I attempted the Duchess storyline in hopes of unlocking her remembrance skin, I somehow managed to skip a stage, progressing the character positions and dialogue trees while missing out on some necessary piece of conversation to hand over a quest item, which just became stuck in my inventory. Can't honestly remember how I managed to get it back on track from there without locking myself out completely, but it's the kind of pain in the ass FromSoft quest design that still requires a game guide open in a second browser just to be able to safely navigate. And it's something which I railed on the original Elden Ring for, and I just hope we can get past it one of these days. Perhaps even a more questionable design decision comes in how they chose to implement the quest objectives for these remembrance quests into the standard gameplay loop itself. Say we've been asked by Bird Boy to go find the Mamulet of Kings, or something, that was lost in the world and now being held by a dangerous being. Nice and generic. The simple thing to do would be to have this Mamulet drop upon defeating, say, the Night 1 or Night 2 boss. Even the Night Lord himself, if we're feeling particularly cruel. Either way, it's something we're not gonna miss, and everyone in the party will be working towards anyway. Makes sense? Too bad, because that ain't what Nightreign does. In a game with already tight deadlines and a constant pressure to hit bosses and loot drops and keep the party viable against progressively more overwhelming bosses, the average Remembrance Quest objective directs you, and you alone, to some corner of the map to fight an unrelated mob. Now, given how precious time is, this creates a bit of a reverse incentive to grab this personal objective, then just quit, or throw the match, and return to base as quickly as possible with the object still in hand. Now, obviously, if you want to be considerate to other players and their time, as well as not kind of self-sabotaging the run, you can always just go in solo, grab the object you need, and then quit that way. Fair enough. But even this, in practice, meant that at least once per session, I or someone else in our group had to quit the lobby for 20 minutes while doing a Remembrance Quest objective. All I'm saying is, all of this could have been avoided by just tying the objective in some way to the mandatory boss. Even if not the boss himself, have some extra little goober spawn in with them, a little like red phantom, and it's like, oh, there he is, let me go grab him while we're fighting the actual thing we're here for. You know, it could have been done in a far more graceful way. Anyway, each run ends with a different Night Lord, all culminating in the final boss, Heelstar, whatever, the Night Lord himself. The specific boss run you want to do can be chosen from the round table, at least once you've gotten past the game's mandatory beginner boss, and which run you pick will determine which lesser bosses you face on the first and second nights. Here is both where the game really excited me and quickly fell off, as we'll see surprise appearances from the bosses of past Souls games as our Night 1 or Night 2 skill check. I must have been grinning like an idiot when the gaping dragon materialised out of the mist. Both it and its Dark Souls 1 boss theme so out of place in a generic Elden Ring grassy field, but goddamn was I happy to see her. You're looking great, girl. Don't touch me. I do feel a bit catfished though, as while I won't spoil every boss, they quickly end up repeating themselves. Like, after seeing 1 or 2 bosses crossing over from other games, my imagination was running wild. Like, will we get some Bloodborne beasts? Amygdala? Orphan of Kos? Maybe some more Souls 1 nostalgia? Hell, bring on the Covetous Demon and all of his glory. But no. And this is probably what contributes most to my feelings that this game lacks content. Sure, it'll still be fun to take a swing at the same boss run with a different character, or just for the hell of it, get better each time. But I was really hoping it would lean into the variety, into being a celebration of FromSoft's history. As it stands, it feels incomplete. And while we've gotten 1 DLC in a year, with all of 4 new boss fights plus a Night Lord, it's not enough for a game with such quick, short, fast-paced runs. I suppose, just to discuss the Night Lords themselves now, these are ultimately what all the stress in prep and leveling and running around the map are for, and really are the towering obstacles that all their stellar presentation and build-up make them out to be. Unless you're that stupid jellyfish one, like, what are you even doing, man? Go home to your wife! Unlike your standard Souls game bosses, whose AI can so often be duped by the simple addition of an extra target, these Night Lord fights are built and balanced around cooperative play. And with health bars that can barely be seen moving from regular solo attacks alone, you won't, at least in my experience, find these exploitable with a cheap one-shot sorcery or mega hyper bleed build, demanding that the team be prepared for an endurance match as they constantly maneuver and cover each other, synergize abilities, and, when necessary, revive fallen comrades, who need a few whacks with regular attacks to get back up, but whose whack bar, yeah, we'll go with that, will become more demanding with each subsequent fall. I've expressed my issues with some of the boss design in base Elden Ring, but I have to say that the Night Lords might honestly be some of the better designed bosses between both games, not you. My far and away personal favourite became Libra, Creature of the Night, whose mysterious introduction, demonic soundtrack, and main character energy just made this goofy goat fucker's battles incredibly memorable. Shame he outshines the actual final boss, Hailster, Holster, whatever, who was honestly one of the lesser ones for me. Anyway, I've kind of exhausted all I have to talk about Nightreign, with my final takeaway being that while I really did enjoy it, it ran out of it for me to enjoy. I never thought I'd ask for more live services, but I could do here with even just a crumb more servicing. I've mentioned the characters' skins a couple times, and while it is a fun feature to have, with callbacks and cosplays from previous games, all unlockable through remembrance quests or in-game currency, there's not really enough here to keep me going. The DLC added 2 new Farers and a new Noxtella-style biome and Night Lord, but again, that's all we've had of post-launch content. The cameo bosses were an awesome idea, and this was really the only game in this series who could have gotten away with this sort of fluid canon nonsense, but they could have and should have taken it so much further. The maps have a minimal degree of procedural generation, mostly following a recognisable structure of fort locations and predictable enemy combinations within, with the only major alterations coming from the shifting earth modifier, throwing in a volcano or a rot swamp or whatever in a portion of the map, which are, again, set and predictable. And then there are the Night Lords themselves, who are given double duty with souped up Everdark versions of themselves, but are still fundamentally the same 8 or so bosses. I want more. And I know I shouldn't, but hey, that's Nightreign. If you enjoyed Elden Ring, if you enjoy Souls games, if you like the build crafting side of things, or a good boss run, but were until now unsure about how it actually scratched those particular itches, I'd say grab a mate or two and give it a go. It may not become your go-to multiplayer game for months and months on end, but it is still a hell of a good time. Hollow Knight Silksong might just be the best game that I will never finish. 2017's Hollow Knight very much passed me by. I was aware of the near cultishly beloved original with its distinct art style and challenging 2D platforming gameplay, but for one reason or another, we never really crossed paths. By contrast, it was pretty hard to avoid being caught in the gravitational pull of its long-awaited sequel, even from the sidelines. With a 7-year window from announcement to surprise release, the intervening silence earned it an almost mythologized place alongside Half-Life 3 for games fans were just waiting for. The ultimate drop, acclaim, and, to really put the team cherry on the cake, $20 price tag was all just enough for me to drop what I was doing and see what all the fuss was about. And on one hand, oh how I'm glad I did. While on the other, holy shit, fuck this game. Set in the gothic bug kingdom of Farloom, we play as Hornet, a returning boss character from OG Hollow Knight, not that I know, who, breaking free from captivity, finds herself tumbling to the bone bottom of this sprawling, tiny kingdom. From here, she must regain her former strengths and ascend to the Holy Citadel, whose religious zealots rule over this land and seemingly ordered her capture in the first place. With entirely hand-drawn animation, the world and characters are both instantly charming and eye-wateringly pretty. Taking cues from its clear Dark Souls influences, these decaying ruins of a once glorious civilization past its prime drip with an atmosphere of oppression and indifference towards the player. So small and insignificant, a literal bug wielding a sewing needle, while at the same time injecting so much life and colour and charm to the backgrounds, to idle animations, and to the many fellow bugs you meet on your deadly climb up the Pilgrim's Path. As a modern spin on the classic Metroidvania formula, it blends mobile, jumpy action with often extra tricky platforming, as we explore this vast interconnected world, gaining tools and abilities to help unlock more and more of its mysteries. A sealed door here, a ledge unreachable there, always filed away for later until we gain the necessary ability to unlock. On this side of things, I found it a lot of fun. It's frankly overwhelming just how much world there is here, with such a feeling of density. Just being lost in this game world, I did feel like a tiny bug, an insignificant insect. Wow, I really did let Shodan get to my head, didn't I? But the art direction and design is just so pitch perfect to capture those feelings. It's a game of such intense atmosphere. It is, in this aspect, an absolute work of art. However, sometimes we do have to fight things in this canvas of a game. A lot of times, actually, and getting to grips with the combat seems to me to be one hell of a bell curve. It's hard, it's punishingly hard, and you'll find right away that it takes a bit of skill to dispatch even the most basic of enemies, as you begin with a downward horizontal strike by default, rather than a directly vertical pogo bounce you'd intuitively expect. A lot of enemies fly and hover around in hard-to-manage patterns, adding an extra layer of danger to these already tricky aerial attacks, all coupled with the prevalence of double hit point damage incidences, where you'll lose 2 masks, this game's hearts, instead of 1 per hit, as well as dealing with very strict hitboxes and contact damage, where merely touching an enemy, even one currently idling or recovering from stunned state, is treated as having taken an attack. A mistimed dive attack, even by a fraction, can have Hornet end her actual attack a moment too soon, and propel you instead into an enemy's carapace. Bounce off an enemy at the wrong angle, and you'll hit the flyer zigzagging just above. All these factors, and more, make it a constant challenge, but one which you can and will begin to account for, and work around, and climb your way up said learning curve. There has been little else this year as satisfying as starting to reliably pull out combos and dance around bosses in Silksong. To feel you've finally mastered the mechanics. till you reach the peak of the bell and it all goes to hell, as bosses, mobs, and even the platforming itself starts to take exponential levels of piss. It seems that with each new annual batch of games, I find myself more and more drawn into the debate over game difficulty. And it wasn't even the FromSoft game this time around. Crazy. Yeah, Silksong is too hard. I'm pretty confident I have never seriously or deliberately used those words for a game before. A game might be unbalanced, have an unfairly designed boss, or 5, dodgy hitboxes, demand too much grinding or prep or learning attack patterns to overcome, but no, it's nothing so easily identifiable here. Silksong is just silly fucking hard. Now, I acknowledge it is catering to people who have already beat Hollow Knight, who loved Hollow Knight, who have spent the intervening 8 or 9 years doing nothing but shitting in a bucket while playing Hollow Knight, and wanted something even more challenging. The classic Soulsborne DLC template of take the base game and inject roids directly into its veins for the expansion. But, despite its initial development as one, an expansion, this is not. It's actually a very long, multi-act game, and one which feels like the developers, Team Cherry, assumed would be played exclusively by veteran hardcore types, or people with infinite time on their hands. Let me be clear here, I felt I put a lot of time into this before I started hitting my head against the walls, but from what I understand, I'm not even close to finishing the damn thing, with each act only getting tougher, the final of which being where a number of YouTubers I follow claims to have put their controllers down for good, despite themselves being old Hollow Knight fans and far better at the game than I am. Now, don't get me wrong, I loved my time with this game. It's here at my second place spot for a reason. But in a way I've never felt with any number of Souls games or Metroidvanias before this, I simply don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes love is about knowing when to walk away. Or some trite shite like that. Anyway, with my broad thesis out of the way, I'll try focus on a few more pointed notes of criticism or praise. I've been comparing it to Soulsborne's a lot, but not just for difficult bosses. Benches, hidden around the world, act as your rest and respawn point, a safe respite from a world trying to kill you. On death, a silk cocoon marks the site of your previous shell, with all your carried shards and precious beads, oh my beads, left within. Until, of course, that inevitable second death en route to recover, at which point you lose it all. Classic Souls. Finding these benches in each new area then becomes a high priority, especially for me because, fun fact, I got through most of Act 1 without manually healing once. At all. Woo! Go me. Any damage taken, I just had to live with for the rest of that life until I found a bench or, died. Now, as much as I'd love to spin this in a way to make me sound really good at the game, I'm just an idiot who didn't know for the longest time healing was even a thing, making an already tricky game needlessly harder for myself. Now, in my defense, if healing is healing, then why call it bind? Bind is the term given to Hornet using accumulated silk through dealing damage and slaying enemies to heal a number of lost masks. Problem is, we're introduced to press circle to bind once, at the very start of the game. It is literally our first action, in fact, before movement, before jumping, before anything else. Truth is though, as someone who just sat down to this series, I took this as a tone-building mystical narrative moment, press F to pay respects, and not, say, a tutorial for a major fucking mechanic I'd never be reminded about again. Now, I did wonder, again, if this was another byproduct of Silksong's origin as DLC, and the assumed in-the-know audience that comes with that. So, out of curiosity, I looked up a long play of the original Hollow Knight, and, true enough, 2 minutes in, after learning movement and jumping and basic attacks, you hit a little text screen that pauses the game and says, "Hey fella, just so you know, you can collect souls from striking enemies. Press this button to use souls to heal." Got that, little buddy? Great, on you go, haha. No such courtesy for Hornet, or me, I guess. Anyway, benches. A minor gripe I have is in the resources you need and lose on death. Throwing knives and other tools are replenished automatically using shards in your possession whenever you return to a bench. Grinding for shards can, however, fall into a similar trap that Blood Vials did in Bloodborne. 20 plus attempts into a boss fight, I've exhausted my life savings of the stuff, requiring me to pull myself out of the rhythm I've just been painstakingly building for said battle to instead go farm mobs. And yes, for whatever reason, your chance of dying to said regular ass mobs, no matter how many times you've mopped the floor with them before, increases exponentially while you have a cocoon full of rosary beads back in the boss room. You know, I'll never understand why that is. On a similar note, runbacks in this, from respawn bench to boss room, are painful. Genuinely, some of the most sadistic shit I have ever seen. Sinner's Road? More like shit on my ass, cunt bastard! Oh sure, after all that, the flying enemies, the swinging spiky death traps, the maggot water that disables your ability to heal, that I just learned about, thank you very much, you've had your pain and patience rewarded with a bench. But wait, the bench is broken. Don't worry, you can fix it right up. You just have to go through the tunnel of shattered hopes and dreams. It might take you a few tries to get it right, but hey, at least the respawn point is only an intercontinental rail ride away. I did say I was going to have some praise for the game in my final notes. But hey, what can I say? Gripes are more demonstrable. The good almost needs you to be there to really appreciate. I could talk about the evocative soundtrack, the sense of awe and antiquity and melancholy, but you need to really soak it in yourself. I could talk about how alive and expressive and charmingly likeable the characters are, but you just have to take my word on it lest you've met them firsthand. And most importantly, when I say that, outside the soul-crushing difficulty and some small questionable mechanical choices, Silksong feels wonderful to actually play controller in hands, to sprint and glide and pierce and slash through the air. Well, I've said it, haven't I? So, that's Silksong. As I said last year, you do have to know when to walk away from a game, and I did find that point here. I was never going to finish it in time for this video, unless you wanted my top 25 games in, I don't know, the year 2038, but hey, I've got the rest of my life to play it, and I am not uninstalling it until it's done. So, while it may be the best game that I'll never finish, it's certainly one that I'll never forget my time with either. But that leaves just one last game for the video, and yep, not much in the way of surprises for my Game of the Year 2025. Clair Obscur Expedition 33. April 2025. Hey, sure, let's play that freaky looking French game. What's the worst that could happen? One credits roll later, I have a new favourite soundtrack stuck in my head, my parry finger won't stop twitching, I'm a little bit in love with Looney, and depressed. Look, can I just be honest before we even begin and say that I don't know where to start with this one. It's currently, well, let's just say, well into 2026. I've completely finished editing every other part of this video, and I've been putting off the write-up for this one because I don't know why. Is it because of its sweep of the Jeff Keighley Awards last year? Did the funny little baguette game become too much of a centre of conversation in the industry? Around the definition of indie, around the purpose of the Game Awards, around the use of Gen AI? Oh yes, that little nugget again. Told you I wasn't quite done with it. That going back and talking about le plot and le gameplay feels kinda quaint. But I suppose that is the mindset I gotta somehow system restore my brain back to. So to that end, maybe I'll just start with my own first impressions of Sandfall Entertainment's debut RPG, which managed to get me hooked and even a little bit teary-eyed from the bloody prologue. Oh, and while I went in nearly blind, if you were still hoping to do the same, somehow over a year after release, fair warning that I will be spoiling the premise, and at least said prologue. But outside of on-screen visuals and characters, I won't be touching on any of the several major plot twists beyond that. Set in a shattered, pseudo-fantastical world inspired by Belle Epoque France, the final remnants of humanity live on the suspiciously Parisian island of Lumiere. Life here goes on happily and baguettefully enough, except for the giant sleepy lady across the horizon and the giant number written on the monolith above her, which for the past 66 years has counted down from 100. Today, it shows 34, but by midnight tonight counts down yet another number, as it has without fail every year since it appeared, and every year, without fail, every person over the age of said number has died. As part of this morbid annual ritual of slow extinction, an expedition of the eldest remaining, whose time has nearly come, warriors, scholars, and people with nothing left to stay for, venture across the sea to confront this so-called paintress and either kill a god, or let their deaths pave the way just a little bit further for those who come after. It is an incredible, weird, intriguing, and heart-wrenching premise, both in concept and in execution, as we begin the game following our main man Gustave as he reconciles with his ex in what, we don't realise at first, is her final hours before the gommage, the wipe, before embarking himself on this explicit suicide mission with others of his doomed demographic. Shit and fan meet almost immediately, and twists, turns, and inversions make up the rest of the story, beginning to end as we follow this collection of survivors and, perhaps, some colourful new characters found along the way, in what branches outwards into what feels like a true, sprawling cross-continent adventure, battling monsters, discovering the fates of past expeditions, and unravelling the secrets underpinning the nature of this world. Now naturally I won't go into detail here, but needless to say, I liked this story quite a lot. I honestly caught on to the gist of what was really happening pretty early on, the broad strokes, so to speak, well before the actual reveals started rolling in, but even so, was still pleasantly, and sometimes unpleasantly surprised with enough of the twists of the knife, even as the scope of the narrative became oddly narrower as the acts go on. The imminent death of the world somehow becoming second to a far more personal, and arguably more compelling, family drama. Still, the whole game is entirely responsible for the term vague slop entering my lexicon, and it 100% earned it. The dialogue can be very purple prose and almost awkward at times. While I like the characters enough for them to get away with it, some of the party banter scenes did give me flashbacks to Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone's improv sessions in the bad Spider-Man film, and there are only so many morose, drawn-out speeches from Andy Serkis I can take about the price that must be paid, and whether you have the will to pay the price of a Cadbury's Freddo bar. Extortionate. This is the price upon which you cannot understand. The payment of. Couple this with cutscenes and individual shots that are stretched out as far as they could reasonably get away with. But fortunately, the characters are great, and the voice performances range from pretty damn good to excellent. Not that you needed my affirmation on that one, given all the awards, but you know, I will say this, after all the heavy talk of the plot twists and the death and the drama, the game has a huge heart, whimsical sense of fun, and is still very much an expression of video gamey joy.
I will never join you again.
There will be a lot of fighting, though.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's true.
There will be a lot of fighting.
Exactly.
Count me in then.
When it comes to game taste, I realise I tend to prioritise narrative. Like, I will find myself forgiving middling gameplay when in service of a story I'm really into. Maybe a bit more than I would the other way around. You know, good gameplay attached to bad or zero story. There's exceptions, obviously, but the former might get an 8 or 9 out of 10 for me, while the latter a 7. If you know what I mean. Point is, for a game as narrative heavy and story driven as this, I feel it necessary to say it wasn't actually the story that was the primary driver for me. While it is compelling in its own way, don't get me wrong, I wasn't actually playing it like, damn, this is the best video game writing ever. It's not. But the thing that ended up hooking me and enticing me back far more was this incredibly satisfying reactive turn-based combat. Described by some as a JRPG, this Final Fantasy-esque turn-based party square-off style combat isn't something I've ever hugely been into, if I'm being honest. But this, combined with just the right amount of planning, tactics, flash, and almost Souls on steroids level of dodge and parry timing, it just worked for me really well. For those concerned about difficulty barriers, there are story mode and easy difficulty settings, and it has been said that the game is beatable without engaging with the parry, a risk-reward method of damage nullification and out-of-turn counterattack, but with far stricter timing windows than a regular dodge. But assuming you're able, I wouldn't deprive yourself of some of the most satisfying ass-kicking boss fight victories you can imagine. Now, coming from someone who can struggle with pinpoint parry timing in other games, I found myself becoming quite reliably consistent here thanks to the presence of audio cues. In fact, there were literally times I'd get through an enemy combo with my eyes closed and found it easier because enemy movements can lie, but the audio cues never do. And even where you might struggle with a certain enemy attack or combo, it is entirely viable just to spend a round or two, even for major bosses, just practicing the dodge and parry timings and restart the fight as many times as you need to. In fact, it is something worth mentioning that E33 is that type of RPG which can, theoretically, be beaten regardless of party level. While leveling up itself is automatic, so it's impossible in real terms to beat this at level 1, but just say if you could somehow have gotten to the final boss at first level, they would be technically beatable through sheer dodge and parry ability alone. Wouldn't want to, for how grindy it would be, but I do appreciate an RPG which lets you get by on more than just numbers alone, if you know what I mean. Anyway, point is, the combat system, is what sold me on the game. The gameplay, the combat, it wasn't just a necessary obstacle in the way of a good story, like some other RPGs can be. No, the story was just icing on an already delicious cake. Oh shit, new giant monster fight to bang my head against for the next hour? Oh shit, another gestural beach challenge? Oh shit, an optional parries only boss? Oh shit, we got so many unspent points I can spend the next 15 minutes meticulously reconstructing my builds.
That's what I've been waiting for. That's what it's all about. Woo!
Each of the several party members you eventually acquire have wholly unique fight styles, but I particularly appreciated how each functioned according to their own set of rules, which simultaneously made each play like a different minigame, in a sense, while ideally also feeding into each other. Now, to be honest, I am a bit too far beyond my actual time with E33 to get too into the minutiae of the mechanics in a way anyone would find informative, but I will say my A-team did remain as Miel, Lune, and Ciel for the majority of the game. Our beautiful magic lady, quite capable of turning into a living nuke by the end of the game. Miss Ungard, skyrocketing in my estimation from a low-utility DPS through most of Act 1 to a goddamn stabby damage god by the end. While Ciel, honestly, she was just the first character I was able to figure out how to reliably get that maxed out 9999 damage early on through her juggling of moon cards and sun cards, and then bada bing bada boom, your health bar's mine now, loser. Now, it does mean there are a lot of different systems and competing priorities to hold in mind at once. Something as simple as a character being stunned or turn order not being as you planned can have a knock-on effect enough to mess up an entire strategy. But it's because of how tightly a well-understood and rehearsed party can just synergize and feed into each other's abilities that I find myself loving these battles, even in their often hair-pulling, sometimes insurmountable feeling difficulty. With the option always there to back out, step back, readjust the countless variables and combinations you can have at your build's disposal, and then try something new. AP management was the name of the game for me, and investing in every little bonus AP Lumina, AP on successful dodge, AP on successful parry, is a good starting point to a good build. But it does go so far beyond that in ways where I have seen others outright break the game. But like I said, it has been a while, and while it is complex at first glance and a little difficult to maybe get your head around at first, the pieces all do start to fall into place, and the whole Lumina and everything else system, I will be honest, I did play halfway through Act 2, barely really investing much in these Lumina points. Once I did though, fucking steamroll city. Again, combat can be challenging, and I suppose there are a couple little quality of life changes I'd have liked just to smooth out the process of dying. By mid to late game, I was struggling to even know where to go, which wasn't direct main quest progress. There are plenty of these optional areas, many of which providing unique weapons or side quest content, but outside of this one binary line of area zone name is in red text, there is no way to gauge how challenging it will be. There were some red zones, indicating that I was a lower level than intended, which I was able to clear without too much hassle. Then there would be another, where I'd be TPK'd on someone stubbing their toe. Optional bosses litter the world, but whether these are reasonable bosses, level 55 for a level 40-something party, or level 99 intended for New Game plus only, isn't communicated at all. Now fortunately, death has little consequence here, with the option to retry after defeat, simply putting you right back to turn 1, while quitting simply deposits you like a few feet away from whatever was bullying you. No boss runbacks here. The thing I was undecided on, however, was the lack of a restart or abandon battle option itself, the retry only ever being offered upon a total party wipe. Now, I understand this is kind of a moot point now, having been added in a more recent update, but at the time, I couldn't decide if this was an irritating inconvenience or actually quite good deliberate design. I mean, I know my ass would have thrown way more attempts at a fight, even ones that I would ultimately end up turning around and winning the moment something went wrong or not to plan, if there was a quick restart option right there. With your only alternative being to skip turn until everyone's dead, the incentive is to instead persevere, to try and grasp victory from the jaws of defeat. But I guess the wider community feedback demanded it, so here we are. On the presentation front, I almost don't need to say anything, do I? The world Sandfall created here is beautiful, from the Art Nouveau environments to the otherworldly bosses and creature designs. There are a bunch of outfits and hairstyles you can collect in-game, and then there's the music. It's superb, much of it becoming an earworm for days and weeks for me, though it did lose something once I realised like 90% of the lyrics were just them repeating the name of the game between intermittent la-la-lums, Clair Obscur, la-la Clair Obscur, la-la-la-la-la-li-lum, etc. That said, something perhaps underappreciated by the overuse of that one particular theme at the Game Awards, again and again and again, is the actual variety at play here. I like to think of there as being like 3 categories of music in E33. We have the cinematic, story, cutscene scores, dramatic, melodious, lots of string and piano. Then there's the battle tracks, for in-game actual combat, loud, bombastic, changing quite drastically from zone to zone. Sometimes it's drums and opera, very Soulsborne shit, sometimes like electronic beats. And then you have the jazzy fun tracks, Monaco's battle music, and the various upbeat themes for the bonus gestural beach challenges, with their totally important to the plot unlockable swimsuits. Oh, and I suppose there's like a secret 4th music category as well. We'll just call it the French getting silly with it. Basically what I'm saying is, yeah, they earned the Best Soundtrack award. On that note, it's kinda hard to really talk in depth about this game without touching on the rhetoric around it, particularly in the wake of its sweep of the Jeff Keighley 33 Awards 2025. Hand on heart, I understand why this caused some people to sour on E33 itself. Admittedly, many such disappointed gamers who were quite vocal on social media would half-heartedly check out the game which had so aggressively dominated the evening, only to come back within days, or sometimes even hours, to admit, okay, fair enough, I kinda get it now, but there is still a lingering stain here. Know what sucks more than feeling like a game hater? Feeling like a game defender. No one wants to feel required to qualify or justify their enjoyment of something. Nobody wants to spend time defending thing when they could just be enjoying universally enjoyed thing. And for most of 2025, that's how it felt to me. The mood around E33 was so positive and celebratory, and I was locked the fuck in to enthusiastically declare it my game of the year. Then suddenly, over the course of a single night, things got weird and ugly and sometimes embarrassing. Yeah, we're getting to that. Still, it's a damn good game. Is it perfect? meaningless statement. Where does it stack, however, to say my previous games of the year? Well, it is strong. I might still put Elden Ring above it. Should it, though, of all games in the past decade or so, have claimed the mantle of most nominations and wins in Game Award history? In another weaker year? Maybe. One which didn't have Silksong, Hades 2, and Girls Frontline Fire Control, sure, but barring that? No, probably not. Now, I'm not going to relitigate the question of what qualifies as an indie. It doesn't. Or whether E33 deserved to win Best Art Direction. The debates around these and some other sticking points turning genuinely fucking vile. But all that said, the critique of Sandfall's known and admitted use of generative AI at some point in E33's development was a dampener for me. One which obviously hasn't done enough to displace it from my top spot, but we do need to talk about game devs and accidentally leaving in Gen AI assets in their products, which has become relevant again from this summer's Game Fest. To be clear, there doesn't seem to be any Gen AI in 33 at present. The one example seen being temporary placeholders patched out within a week of launch, which Sandfall claims were placed in as early development in 2022, when Gen AI technology was still fairly new among the mainstream, and some members of the team were merely experimenting with ways to incorporate it into the workflow, a practice which was attempted, decided against, and dropped in short order. Again, all according to Sandfall. Now, I am inclined to take them at their word on this, that it was a passing curiosity at a time when the tech seemed new and exciting and hadn't yet garnered quite the backlash. And to me, that's the difference between this and the Tainted Grail Awaken Realms situation, where a company routinely keeps getting caught using it, non-apologising, then does it again. That said, there is something cynical and depressing about using this tech in any way in a game whose very premise revolves around themes of art, creativity, and, most pertinently, the human soul, or at least some fragment or memory of a soul being imprinted onto works of art by their creator. If I wasn't already clear enough with the half-hour Grail rant, I do not want to see generative AI in any form in the artistic fields, be that film, TV, music, Lune_Clair_Obscur_Expedition_33. Wow, 700, that it? Or in gaming. I could understand the temptation years back when this tech seemed new and innovative, especially for a relatively small studio looking for ways to save time or cut a corner here or there. But even with that thinnest of excuses, and it should be said Sandfall is not a small studio of wet behind the ear, scrappy little devs, like they're all former Ubisoft veterans who just got tired of making Assassin's Creed games or whatever. That time of novelty has passed. The time of recognising the slop for what it is very much here. And here are where my concerns arise anew, as the just recently announced game 1666 Amsterdam was caught using Gen AI in both marketing images and within the gameplay trailer itself. Want to take 3 guesses on the developer's response? Oops, those were temporary placeholders we forgot to remove. E33 may have been on the last chopper out of Saigon when it comes to this particular excuse. But even then, it's hard for this recent deja vu to not make me start second-guessing my charitability. Give an inch now, miles will be taken later. Now, I love this game, I truly do, and I don't want to overblow what is, end of the day, a mild disappointment. But time will tell whether a few wonky-looking Parisian posters will be looked back as a relic from that time when game devs briefly dabbled in an ugly passing fad, or as one of the first big stones laid in the path towards enslopification, brought up in the future as derisively as Oblivion horse armor is today in discussions of microtransaction and DLC culture. But anyway, that was hardly the final note I wanted to end this video on, but hey, welcome to the games industry. Good game, 9 out of 10. And with that, I am done. You are free to go about your day now. Thank you to my wonderful patrons, and in addition to whatever I put out between now and then, see you in about 6 or 7 months, I hope, for the 2026 video, which will hopefully, finally, be synced back up with the actual new year. We're getting there. See you then. Bye just now.